The wind was cutting through the bus stop like it had teeth. A little girl stood under the flickering shelter light, arms wrapped around herself until her shoulders shook. She wasn't waiting for a ride. She was trying not to fall over. One bike rolled past, slow, exhaust rumbling low, then another, then 5 more. A small convoy coming back from a charity run. And then Ryder saw her. "Stop," he said into the helmet mic. The line of bikes eased down, brakes hissing, headlights swinging toward the shelter like spotlights. The girl didn't run. She stared at the pavement like it was safer than looking up. Ryder killed the engine and walked over with his palms open. "Hey, you okay?" Her eyes flicked up for a heartbeat, then down again. Her lashes were wet. Not from snow. From crying. Before we continue, tell us in the comments where you are watching this from. City, country, anywhere. I want to know how far this reaches, because this happened on a street that looked ordinary until you noticed a kid freezing on it. Ryder crouched. "What's your name?" She hesitated, swallowing like her throat hurt. "Mila." "How old are you, Mila?" She held up 8 fingers, then paused and added one more. 9. 9 years old, in the dark, alone. "Where's your coat?" Ryder asked. Thin sweatshirt, no gloves, no hat, socks inside sneakers that were too big, soles peeling at the toes. A plastic grocery bag dangled from one wrist, stretched white from being overstuffed. "Are you waiting for somebody?" he asked. Mila's teeth clicked. "They told me to sleep on the street." Ryder didn't answer right away. He kept his voice steady. "Who told you that?" Behind him, the rest of the club dismounted. Tank, built like a wall. June, braid down her back. Ghost, already on his phone. June pulled a spare hoodie from her bag. "Can I put this on you?" June asked. Mila flinched at the soft tone, suspicious of kindness, but the cold won. She let June drape it over her shoulders. Her hands stayed locked around that bag. Ryder scanned the empty street. No bus, no adult, no car waiting with hazards on. "What's in the bag?" June asked, careful not to reach. Mila's fingers tightened. "My stuff." "Okay," June said. "You keep it." Tank's eyes worked the road. "Where are they?" he asked again, lower this time. Mila jumped anyway. June gave Tank a look. He backed off. "Sorry." Ryder kept it steady. "You in foster care?" Mila nodded fast. "Where's your home?" Ryder asked. "What street?" "I don't know," Mila said. "They drive. I don't look." Ghost returned, phone in hand. "Emergency foster hotline says if the child is in danger, call 911. They won't send anyone without a case number." Ryder blinked. "A case number." Mila lifted her hand, fingers shaking. "I've been here 5. 5 what?" Ryder asked. Mila's voice came out thin. "Hours." June's face tightened. Tank's jaw popped once. Tank pulled a blanket from his saddlebag. June wrapped Mila up and checked her cheek with the back of her hand. Mila stayed still, wide-eyed, like she expected the warmth to come with a price. June crouched. "Mila, did you run away?" Mila's eyes flashed. "No." "Then why are you here?" June asked. Mila hugged the bag tighter. "They said go. They said if I come back they call police and say I steal." June's voice stayed soft. "Who said that?" Mila hesitated. "Ms. Karen. And her boyfriend." Tank exhaled through his nose, fighting himself. Ghost put 911 on speaker. The dispatcher asked questions, then said units were being sent and told them not to leave the child. Ryder looked at Mila's shaking knees in the open street behind her. "We're not leaving her," he said, "but she can't stay in this wind." June pointed toward the gas station across the road. 10 feet into the light, warmth, cameras. Mila tried to stand. Her knees wobbled. Ryder offered his hand again. Mila stared at his glove, then slipped her frozen fingers into it. They started toward the station. That's when a car turned the corner fast, headlights cutting across the shelter. Tires hissed as it slowed hard, like the driver had been searching. Mila's grip tightened until it hurt. "And there you are!" a woman's voice snapped. The door flew open. A woman climbed out, face set in irritation, not relief. Hair pulled tight, cheap coat. Her eyes went straight to Mila like she was a missing item that needed to be put back. Then she saw the bikes and the vests and her mouth twisted. "What is this?" she barked. "Why is my foster child with you people?" June stepped forward, still shielding Mila. "Ma'am, she's freezing. She's dramatic," the woman snapped. "Mila, get over here, now." Mila pressed into June's side. "No," Ryder kept his hands visible. Are you Karen? The woman's chin lifted. Yes, Ms. Karen, and she's coming with me. Do you have ID? Ryder asked. Karen laughed sharp. In the car. This is ridiculous. Hand her over. June didn't move. We called 911. Karen's eyes widened a fraction, then narrowed. Of course you did. Ryder stayed calm. Why was she outside for 5 hours? Karen's eyes darted to the shelter, to the road, like she was searching for a version of the night that sounded better. Because she stormed out, she snapped. Because she thinks rules don't apply to her. Karen's answer was instant, practiced. She ran off. She throws fits. She's trying to get attention. Mila's voice cracked. You said go. Karen snapped her head toward Mila. I said cool off. Stop twisting my words. June's tone hardened. Did you tell her to sleep on the street? Karen scoffed. No. Mila shook her head hard, tears spilling. You said if I come back you call police and say I steal. Karen turned to Ryder, fast. She did steal from me earlier. She's lying because she knows she's in trouble. June took a slow breath. If she stole, you call the police. You don't throw her onto a street with no coat. Karen's voice sharpened. I didn't throw her. I told her to go to her room. She refused. She pushed past me. She wanted this. She wants strangers to feel sorry for her. Mila shook her head hard. You locked it. Karen froze for a split second, then snapped. She's confused. Ryder's eyes didn't leave Karen. Then let the officer sort it out. Step back and wait. Karen pulled out her phone, jabbing at the screen with shaking fingers. Fine. I'm calling my caseworker right now. It rang, went to voicemail. Karen hit redial like anger could force someone to answer. They know me, she said, too loud. They know I'm a good home. Ghost spoke, calm. You left a 9-year-old outside for 5 hours. That's not a good home. Karen's head whipped toward him. Shut up. Ghost's phone stayed up, recording. Karen noticed and hated it. Turn that off, Karen hissed. No, Ghost said. Karen forced a fake laugh. Wow, bikers filming foster kids. Ryder didn't bite. Mila, do you want to go with Ms. Karen? Mila's head snapped side to side. No. It wasn't hesitation. It was fear. Karen's voice went cold. You don't know what she's like. June looked at the blanket, the gloves swallowing Mila's hands, the bag she refused to release. We know what she's like right now, June said. She's cold and terrified. Karen stepped forward. Mila, get in the car. Tank moved a half step, and the space in front of Mila disappeared. Karen stopped short and glared up at him. You can't keep her. That's kidnapping. Nobody's keeping her, Ryder said. We're keeping her safe until officers arrive. Karen pointed at Ryder, shaking with anger. I have paperwork. I have people who will ruin you for this. Ryder nodded once. Then your people can explain why a 9-year-old ended up at a bus stop without a coat. Karen's eyes flicked to Mila's bag. Give me that, she snapped, reaching for it. Mila recoiled, hugging it to her chest. June shifted, blocking the grab without touching Karen. Don't. Karen's face tightened. She doesn't need that. It's junk. She's manipulating you, Mila whispered, shaking. It's mine. Ryder's voice dropped lower. Step back. Karen didn't. She leaned in again, fast, trying to snatch the bag, then the sleeve. Anything she could grab before the police showed up. Tank slid forward like a wall closing. Karen's arm shot past him anyway, fingertips grazing Mila's sweatshirt. And Mila screamed, Don't! Mila's scream ripped through the night so sharply that even the traffic on the far lane seemed to slow. Karen's hand froze in midair, like she'd been caught doing something she couldn't explain. For a second, her face flashed with something ugly. Then she snapped it back into outrage. See? She barked, loud enough for the whole gas station to hear. She does this. She's hysterical. She's trying to make me look like a monster. June didn't let go of Mila. She shifted her body so Mila was behind her, blanket wrapped tight, little hands still crushed around that plastic bag like it was the only thing in the world that belonged to her. Tank's voice stayed low. You reach for her again, and you're going to have a different kind of problem. Karen pointed at him. Threatening me? Great, perfect. I'm calling the police and telling them you're intimidating me. Ghost lifted his phone. Already called, already recording, and the gas station has cameras. Karen's eyes flicked toward the building like she'd forgotten the world could store receipts. Before we go any further, drop a comment. Where are you watching this from? Because this isn't some far-off nightmare story. This was a normal road, a normal bus stop, and a kid was left to freeze on it like she didn't count. The first police cruiser rolled in a minute later, lights washing the pavement red and blue. Another followed, slower, positioning at an angle like the officers were preparing for trouble the moment they saw the bikes. Ryder stepped forward before anyone could start talking over anyone else. Calm. Hands out, no sudden moves. "Officer," he said, "we found her alone. She says she was told to sleep on the street. We called 911. She's 9. Karen snapped in before the officer even fully got out. "They're kidnapping my foster child. They're refusing to hand her over. I want her back now." The officer's gaze moved from Karen to Ryder to the vests and back again. His posture changed in tiny ways, alert, guarded, deciding who he trusted. Then his eyes landed on Mila. She was half hidden behind June, blanket up to her chin. Her cheeks were red from cold, her lips were pale, her eyes were huge and glassy, and she looked at Karen like Karen was a stove she'd already been burned by. The officer's voice softened without meaning to. "Hey, sweetheart, what's your name?" Mila didn't answer. June leaned slightly. "Mila," she whispered. "It's okay. He's not her." Mila swallowed. "Mila." "How long you been out here, Mila?" the officer asked. 5 hours, Ghost said before Mila could. "She told us. We got here maybe 10 minutes ago." Karen threw her hands up. "That's a lie. She ran away. She storms out when she's mad. I can't chain her to the house." Ryder didn't raise his voice. "She said you told her to sleep on the street." Karen's face hardened. "Kids say things." The officer looked at Karen. "Do you have paperwork? ID? Foster placement documentation?" Karen yanked open her car door, rummaged dramatically, and produced a folder like she'd been waiting to perform. "Here, there. She's placed with me. She's mine." June's jaw tightened at the word. The officer took the folder, flipped through it, then looked back at Mila. "Mila, do you want to go with Ms. Karen tonight?" Mila shook her head so hard her hair slapped her cheeks. "No," Karen's voice went brittle. "Mila, don't you start. Don't you—" "Ma'am," the officer cut in, tone warning. "Step back." Karen stared at him like she couldn't believe she'd been corrected. The second officer moved toward June and Mila. "Can I talk to her?" June didn't move. "Talk, yes. Touch, no." The officer bristled. "Ma'am," Ryder stepped in, not aggressive, just present. "She's scared. Ask her questions from right there." The first officer's eyes flicked to Ryder, then to June, then to Mila again, and he made a decision. "Fine. Miss June, right? You stay. But everyone else give space." Tank and Ghost backed off 2 steps. Ryder stayed near but not hovering. Karen didn't back off until the officer looked at her hard enough that she finally took one angry step away. The officer crouched at Mila's level. "Mila, I'm not here to get you in trouble. I'm here to make sure you're safe. Were you hurt tonight?" Mila hesitated, eyes on June's sleeve. Then, very slowly, she lifted one wrist. Under the blanket on her arm, faint yellow-green bruises peeked out, old enough to be healing, new enough to still look sore. June's breath caught. Ryder's stomach tightened. Karen saw it too. Her face went blank for a split second, then she snapped, "She bruises easy. She throws herself around when she tantrums. She's always trying to blame someone." Mila flinched like Karen's voice was a slap. The officer straightened, and his whole attitude changed. Not fully, still cautious, but the automatic assumption that Karen was the responsible adult started cracking. "Dispatch," he said into his radio. "I need CPS on call, now, and EMS. Child possible exposure, possible injury." Karen exploded. "Excuse me, what are you doing? She's fine, you can't—" "Ma'am," the officer said, sharper this time, "you're going to lower your voice or I'm going to have you sit in the back of my cruiser while we figure this out." Karen stared, mouth open, like the word no had never been spoken to her before. June adjusted the blanket around Mila. "You're doing good," she whispered. Mila's fingers were numb, but she still refused to let go of the plastic bag. She kept it pinned to her chest, the thin handles cutting into her knuckles. "What's in the bag, Mila?" the second officer asked, more gently now. Mila's chin trembled. "My clothes, my book, my paper." "What paper?" Ryder asked. Mila looked at him, then down. "The paper says my name, so if they take me, I can show I'm me." June stared at her. Who told you that? Mila swallowed. A lady. Before. She said if I don't have paper, people say I'm lying. Ryder's eyes flicked to Karen. How many placements has she had? Karen's voice came fast, defensive. I don't know. It doesn't matter. It mattered. The first officer turned back to Karen. Who's her caseworker? Karen rattled off a name like a password. Ghost repeated it quietly into his phone, recording, like he was memorizing it for later. The officer radioed dispatch again. Try the caseworker, then the supervisor. I need someone on call who can authorize emergency placement. Karen snorted. They'll tell you to bring her home. Mila made a tiny sound in her throat, almost a whimper. She pressed closer to June. June kept her voice low. Mila, has she ever locked you out before? Mila's head dipped, a nod so small it was almost invisible. Karen snapped, No, no, she's lying! Ryder watched Mila's face, not Karen's. How many times, Mila? Mila whispered, barely audible. 2. June swallowed hard. What happened? Mila's eyes shined. I sleep on the porch. I hide behind the trash can so the neighbors don't see. Karen's shoulders rose like she was ready to scream again, but the first officer raised a hand, cutting her off without even looking at her. Is that true? He asked Karen. Karen laughed, loud and fake. Absolutely not. She's making stories because she wants attention from this. She waved at the bikes like they were a circus. Tank's voice stayed quiet, but it carried. If she wanted attention, she'd be yelling. She's trying to disappear. For the first time, Karen didn't have a comeback immediately. A paramedic unit pulled in, doors slamming, boots hitting pavement. A woman with a medical bag approached, eyes scanning the child first. Hi, the medic said to Mila. I'm going to check you, okay? Just to make sure you're warm enough. Mila's body stiffened. June leaned close. She's safe, she whispered. I'm right here. The medic crouched and took Mila's temperature, checked her hands. She's cold, she said to the officers. Not hypothermic yet, but she's been out too long. She needs warming, food, and a safer environment than a sidewalk. Karen crossed her arms. She eats plenty. She's dramatic. The medic glanced up at Karen, expression flat. Kids don't get dramatic when they're safe. That sentence landed heavy. The first officer stepped away to hear his radio better. June could hear scraps of the conversation, dispatch struggling to reach the caseworker, voicemail after voicemail. The after-hours CPS number was answering, but putting them on hold. On hold. While a child stood shivering in a blanket on a gas station sidewalk, Ryder's voice stayed controlled, but anger sat underneath it like a live wire. So what happens if they don't answer? The officer rubbed his forehead. We do what we can. If CPS doesn't pick up, technically she goes back to her legal placement unless there's immediate cause to remove. June's throat tightened. Immediate cause? She was abandoned. The officer's eyes flicked to Mila's bruises. I'm documenting, but I need authorization. Karen's smile came back thin and sharp. See? She comes with me. Mila's knees trembled. Ryder turned to Mila, voice gentle again. Mila, I need you to tell the officer the truth. Why were you told to leave? Mila looked like she wanted to fold into herself. June squeezed her shoulder. Just one sentence, she murmured. Only what you can. Mila's lips moved, but no sound came out. Then she forced it out like it hurt. Because I said I would tell. Ryder's eyes narrowed. Tell what? Mila's gaze snapped to Karen, and terror slammed into her so hard she visibly recoiled. Karen's voice went icy. Mila, don't. The first officer's head lifted. Ma'am, stop talking. Karen didn't stop. She leaned forward, eyes burning. She is confused. She hears things on TV. She makes things up. Mila whispered, shaking. I heard you say. Karen's hand clenched into a fist at her side. June saw it. Ryder saw it. The officer saw it. The first officer stepped between Karen and Mila like he was moving on instinct now. That's enough. Karen's eyes flashed. You can't keep her from me. The officer's voice turned hard. Watch me. He turned back to Mila. Mila, who are you going to tell? Your caseworker? Mila nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. She don't answer. Karen laughed sharp. Because she calls nonstop and lies. Mila shook her head. I called once. Ryder's voice dropped. What were you going to tell, Mila? Mila's breath hitched. Her fingers crushed the plastic bag so tight it crinkled like a warning. I heard her boyfriend say, Mila started, then stopped. Her eyes widened like she'd just realized what saying it out loud could do. Say what? June asked, barely breathing. Mila swallowed again, and her voice came out like a thread. He said, if I talk, he'll put me back where I came from. And nobody will— A crackle burst from the officer's radio. Unit 12, dispatch said. We have a supervisor on the line. CPS is advising return to placement tonight. They say there's no removal order active. Karen's mouth curled into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The officer stared at his radio like it had insulted him. June's grip on Mila tightened. Ryder looked from the officer to Karen, then down at Mila's terrified face. The officer took a breath, squared his shoulders, and stepped toward June. Ma'am, he said, voice heavy, I need you to hand the child to the foster parent. Mila's body went rigid. June didn't move, and Mila's frozen fingers slipped off June's sleeve as the officer reached in. June didn't step aside. She didn't raise her voice either. She just tightened the blanket around Mila and stayed planted. Officer, Ryder said, steady, you heard the medic. She needs warming and an evaluation. Escort us to the ER. She can't go anywhere she's terrified to go. Karen snapped a laugh. He's not a doctor. He's a biker. The medic straightened. She's been exposed for hours. I'm recommending transport. The first officer hesitated, hand still half extended toward Mila. His radio crackled again. Return to placement, no removal order. If you've ever watched adults argue about what a child is allowed to feel, drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. Because this is what it looks like when policy stands between a kid and basic safety. Ma'am, the officer said to Karen, a hospital isn't me taking her away. It's medical care. Karen's face pinched. She needs discipline. Mila pressed her forehead into June's jacket like she wanted to disappear. The officer looked at the bruises, then at Mila's shaking hands, and made the call. EMS will transport, he said. I'm following. You can follow in your car, ma'am. You will not touch her right now. Karen's mouth dropped open. What? You heard me. Step back. Karen yanked out her phone and stabbed a contact. Fine. We'll do it this way. June moved with Mila toward the ambulance. One handle of Mila's bag tore, spilling thin shirts, a worn paperback, a clear sleeve with a folded paper inside. Mila lunged. My paper! June caught it and slid it back into Mila's hands. Safe. I've got you. Tank walked beside them like a shadow. Ghost filmed low. Cruiser lights. The shelter timestamp still glowing on his screen. Karen's plate when she turned away. Ryder kept his hands open, calm, the way you handle a frightened animal. No sudden moves, no corners. The ambulance doors shut. Mila vanished behind tinted glass. June stayed inside. The medic allowed it after one look at Mila's panic. The ambulance pulled out. The cruiser followed. The bikes rolled behind, escorting. The hospital was all fluorescent light and cold air. A triage nurse took one look at Mila and said, Room 3, now. Karen marched in behind them, already loud. I'm her foster mother. She's coming with me. A security guard drifted closer. The officer cut Karen off at the hallway. You can wait here. Karen's nostrils flared. I have rights. You have instructions. Sit. Inside room 3, warm packs were pressed into Mila's palms. The nurse asked her name, her age, if she'd eaten. Mila answered in whispers until she heard Karen's voice in the hall. Then she shut down, eyes fixed on the floor tiles like they were the only safe place to look. June stayed at the side of the bed, not touching unless Mila leaned into her first. You're not in trouble, June murmured. Nobody's allowed to yell at you in here. Mila's lips trembled. She'll be mad. June kept her voice low. Let her be mad. In the waiting area, the officer took Ryder's statement while Tank watched the doors, and Ghost quietly texted the club's old contact list. People who knew courtrooms, not back alleys. One reply came fast. Call me now. Ryder didn't move, but his jaw set. Ryder gave times, locations, exact words like he was building a wall out of facts. A social worker badge appeared like it had been summoned. She spoke to the medic, saw the bruises, then looked at the officer. CPS responding? They advised return, he said, voice tight. The social worker stared at him. With bruising and exposure? Over the phone, I'm pushing back. She turned on her heel and made her own call, voice clipped, professional, the kind that didn't ask permission. A minute later, she was speaking into the receiver like she'd caught someone stealing. Yes, I'm filing a report. Yes, tonight. Yes, I want the on-call supervisor. Put it in the notes that the child expressed fear of the placement. Karen tried to insert herself, sliding closer with a stiff smile. She's dramatic. She bruises easy. She makes up stories. The social worker didn't even look at her. Then you won't mind an exam. Karen's smile twitched. The officer's radio crackled again, and he stepped aside to listen. Ryder caught the words anyway. Return. No emergency removal. Document and release. Ryder watched the officer's face. The man wasn't comfortable with what he was being told, and that was the only reason the night hadn't already ended badly. Karen saw it too. She stood up, confidence coming back like a tide. See? They'll tell you. Bring her to the car. Let's go. From inside room 3, Mila's small voice cut through the door. I didn't run away. Karen snapped toward the sound. Mila, ma'am, the guard warned. Wait. Karen forced a smile and sat, tapping her foot like she could kick time into obedience. She kept glancing at the hallway like she was measuring how fast she could slip past security if they blinked. The nurse stepped out and spoke quietly to the officer and the social worker. Her temperature's low. She needs observation. Also, she flinches every time she hears that woman. That's not normal. The social worker nodded once, like a checkbox clicked into place. Thank you. The officer exhaled and walked back to Karen. She's staying for evaluation. Karen shot up. No, absolutely not. I'm her placement. The officer's tone stayed controlled. Medical evaluation. Karen leaned closer, voice syrupy, dangerous. You want to be the guy who keeps a foster kid from her home? You know who calls your captain, right? The officer's eyes hardened. Step back. Karen's phone buzzed. She answered on the first ring. Yes, they took her to the hospital. Yes, the bikers are still here. No, the cop thinks he's a hero. Get here. She hung up and smiled at Ryder. My boyfriend's on his way. Tank's eyes narrowed. The one who threatened her? Karen shrugged. He keeps the house safe? Ryder didn't look away. From a 9-year-old? Karen's smile slipped for half a second. Watch yourself. Inside room 3, the doctor came in, asked gentle questions, then requested Karen's medical consent paperwork. Mila's head snapped up at the word consent. She signs for me, Mila whispered to June, eyes wide. But she don't read. June blinked. Who doesn't read? Mila swallowed. The papers. She says it's fine, it's just money stuff. But Derek says if I talk, I'll go back where I came from, and nobody will. June leaned closer. Nobody will what? Mila's voice cracked. Nobody will come. June felt cold crawl up her spine. She looked at the doctor. She's scared of the boyfriend. Please don't let him near her. The doctor's expression changed. He's not coming back here. The door to room 3 cracked open. June stepped out, face pale but controlled. How is she? Ryder asked. Cold, scared. They asked if she feels safe going back, June said. Her eyes flicked to Karen. Mila said no, twice. Karen sprang up. She's being coached. The officer stepped in, voice like steel. Sit down. The automatic doors whooshed and a man walked in like he owned the building. Mid-30s, heavy shoulders, the kind of confidence that came from never being checked. He spotted Karen. Derek, she breathed, relief turning into anger. Finally, Derek's eyes swept the vests in the cruiser, and he smirked. So these are the clowns. Tank rose slowly. You Derek? Derek ignored him and aimed at Ryder. You keeping our kid? She's being evaluated, Ryder said. She was found abandoned. Derek laughed and headed for the hallway like rules didn't apply. The guard moved. Sir, you can't go back there. Derek didn't stop. Watch me. The officer caught his arm. Step back. Don't touch me, Derek said, yanking free hard enough to make the officer stumble. Everything went still. The officer recovered and his voice dropped. Hands behind your back. Derek blinked. You serious? Now, Karen shouted. He didn't do anything. Derek glanced at the hallway again, calculating. I'm seeing my kid. Not tonight, the officer said. You can't keep her from us. From inside room 3, Mila's voice trembled, loud enough to carry. Please don't let him in. June froze. The social worker's eyes sharpened. You heard that. The officer tightened his grip. Last warning. Derek's smile dropped. His voice went low. She doesn't get to decide. He shoved the officer's shoulder, hard enough to jolt the badge. The officer moved instantly, hooking Derek's elbow, twisting him away from the hallway, and the handcuffs flashed silver under the fluorescent lights. Derek cursed, trying to wrench free, and the officer drove him down toward the tile. Derek hit the tile with a grunt, one cheek pressed to the cold floor, his hands wrenched behind his back. The cuffs clicked shut with a clean metallic finality that made the whole waiting area go quiet for half a second. Then Karen's voice shattered it. "Get off him!" she screamed, lunging forward like she was going to peel the officer off with her bare hands. "He didn't do anything! You're assaulting him!" Security moved fast. One guard stepped between Karen and the officer, palms out. "Ma'am, back up!" Derek twisted, trying to look over his shoulder. "You're making a mistake," he growled, breath hot with anger. "I'm calling my lawyer. I'm calling the city. I'm calling—" "You're being detained for interfering and for assaulting an officer," the cop said, voice tight, controlled, the kind that had snapped into training mode. "Stop resisting." "I'm not resisting," Derek barked as he immediately resisted, shoulders bucking, legs kicking like he'd never been told no in his life. Tank took one step forward, then stopped. He didn't need to touch Derek. He didn't need to. The officer had it, the cameras had it, the guards had it. Ryder's eyes stayed on the hallway door to room 3. Mila was behind that door. That was all that mattered. If you're watching this and you've ever seen an adult try to bulldoze through rules just because they're used to winning, tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Because this wasn't a courtroom. This was a hospital. And a 9-year-old was still the smallest person in the room, still the one who had the least say. Karen's face was flushed. She jabbed a finger at Ryder like he'd personally handcuffed Derek. "This is your fault. You're poisoning her against us." June stood near the hallway, jaw tight, hands clenched at her sides. "She begged us not to let him in." Karen's eyes flashed. "Because she's manipulative." The officer got Derek upright, one hard pull, and Derek stumbled to his feet with cuffs behind him. His stare found June, then slid to the hallway. "Where is she?" he demanded. "You don't get to ask that," the officer said, steering him away. "You don't get to go near her." Karen followed, shouting, "You can't take him! He's done nothing! He's the only one who can handle her!" Handle her. The words hung in the air like smoke. Ghost lowered his phone for a second and glanced at Ryder. "I've got all of it," he murmured. "The shove, the threats, her saying he handles her." Ryder nodded once. "Keep it safe." As Derek was marched toward the doors, he craned his neck and hissed, "You think this is over? You don't know who you just embarrassed." The officer didn't answer. The doors whooshed open, cold air rushed in, and Derek disappeared into flashing red and blue reflections. Karen stopped at the threshold, breathing hard like she'd run a mile. For a moment she looked truly rattled. Then she pulled out her phone and hit a contact with a smile that was too sharp to be real. "Hi," she said, voice suddenly sweet. "Yes, it's me. They're trying to keep Mila here. Yes, the biker people are still here. I need you to come down. Like, now." She ended the call and turned slowly back toward Ryder and June, like she'd just placed a bet she was sure would pay. "CPS will handle this," Karen said, calm now. "And when they do, you're going to regret stepping in." June didn't blink. "We already regret not stepping in sooner." Inside room 3, Mila sat propped up on the bed with warm blankets stacked on her chest. Her hands were wrapped around a styrofoam cup of soup like it was a heater. The nurse had put fuzzy socks on her feet. Her hair was still damp from melted snow. She looked better than she had at the bus stop, but her eyes kept flicking to the door every time a footstep passed. June sat beside the bed, not too close, close enough. "They won't let him in," she said. Mila's voice came out small. "He'll be mad." June nodded once, honest. "Yeah, he probably will." Mila stared at her soup like the surface could tell her the future. "When he's mad, She stopped. Her mouth closed tight like a lock. June didn't push. "You don't have to finish." Mila's fingers tightened around the cup. "If I talk, they put me back." "Back where?" June asked, careful, soft. Mila's throat moved. "The big place. Before. With the loud kids, where they forget your name." June felt something cold settle in her chest. "Did they say that to you?" Mila nodded. The doctor came back in, looked at Mila's vitals, then glanced at June. "We're holding her for observation," he said, "and I need the social worker back in here." June's eyes lifted. "Thank you." Out in the hallway, the social worker returned with a clipboard and the kind of face people wear when they're done being polite. She spoke quietly to the officer, then turned toward Ryder. "We have a problem," she said. Ryder's expression didn't change. "What kind?" "The kind where the phone supervisor is trying to make this go away," she replied. "They're calling it behavioral. They want her discharged back to placement." The officer's jaw flexed. "I documented bruising, exposure, fear statement." "And they're still pushing return," the social worker said, eyes flat, "which tells me somebody wants this quiet." Ryder glanced toward Karen, who was sitting with arms crossed like she was waiting for a table at a restaurant. "Who did she call?" "Someone who'll show up," the social worker said. "If it's the on-call supervisor, they'll come with authority and attitude." Tank drifted closer, voice low. "What's the move?" Ryder didn't answer right away. He looked at the officer. "If CPS orders return, you have to do it?" The officer held Ryder's gaze. "If they present a lawful directive and there's no court hold, yes." June stepped out of room 3 at that moment, closing the door softly behind her. Her face was pale. "Mila said they threatened to send her back where they forget your name if she talked." The social worker's eyes sharpened. "That's coercion." June swallowed. "And she said Karen signs papers without reading them. Derek tells her it's money stuff." Ghost's head tilted. "Money stuff?" June nodded barely. "Mila said she heard them talk about checks, about how kids are worth more when they're quiet." A silence fell that wasn't empty. It was heavy. The officer spoke first, voice tight. "Okay, that's—" He stopped, then started again. "That's enough for me to request emergency protective custody, but I need CPS to cooperate." Ryder's phone buzzed. A text from someone Ghost had pinged earlier. "Call now." Ryder stepped aside, dialed immediately. A woman picked up on the first ring. "Hannah," she said. No greeting, straight to it. "Tell me you didn't put hands on anyone." "No," Ryder said. "We found a 9-year-old abandoned. Foster parent tried to take her. Boyfriend just got cuffed for pushing a cop." "Good," Hannah said. "Stay calm. Say as little as possible. Record everything, and do not leave that child alone with them." Ryder looked toward Karen. "CPS is trying to send her back tonight." Hannah's voice turned sharper. "Which hospital?" Ryder told her. "I'm on my way," she said. "And Ryder, if they try to remove her without a court order, you tell the officer to request a supervisor at the hospital and to document the child's fear statement on body cam. Loud enough for the cameras. Got it?" "Got it." He ended the call and turned back. "Lawyer's coming," he said to the officer and social worker. "She knows the system." The social worker nodded once, relieved. "Good." Karen's phone buzzed again. She answered, stood up, and her posture changed instantly, straight-backed, smug, like the cavalry had arrived. "Yes," she said into the phone. "I'm in the lobby. Hurry." The automatic doors opened, and a woman walked in with a lanyard and a tablet, moving like she was late for something more important than this. Short hair, black coat. ID badge swung at her chest. CPS. Karen's face softened into a performance smile. "Thank God," she said, voice loud enough to make sure everyone heard. "I've been dealing with these people all night." The CPS woman's eyes flicked across the bikes, the officer, the security guards. "I'm Supervisor Latham," she said, clipped. "What's going on?" Karen launched into it like she'd rehearsed in the mirror. "The bikers took my foster child. They've been influencing her. She's acting out. The hospital is overreacting. I want her released to me immediately." Latham turned to the officer. "Is that accurate?" The officer's shoulders squared. "We found the child outside for hours without proper clothing. She stated she was told to sleep on the street. She has bruising. She expressed fear of returning. The boyfriend attempted to force his way into the treatment area and shoved me." Latham blinked once, then her face smoothed into something professional and distant. "The boyfriend isn't the legal placement." "He lives in the home," June said, voice tight. Latham's eyes slid to June, like June was furniture that had started talking. "And you are?" "A witness," June said, "and she begged us not to let him in." Latham turned away, already dismissing. "Children say things when they're dysregulated." Mila's words echoed in June's head. "When he's mad, he—" June stepped closer, voice steady. "She wasn't dysregulated. She was freezing." Karen jumped in. "She throws fits to get her way." Ryder watched Latham's eyes, not soft, not curious, not even cautious, just tired. Like this was paperwork. Latham tapped on her tablet. The directive from on-call was return to placement, she said. Unless there is an active removal order, the child goes back. The social worker stepped in. Medical is holding her for observation. And when she's cleared, Latham said without missing a beat, she returns to placement. The officer's voice tightened. She stated she doesn't feel safe. Latham didn't look at him when she answered. Fear statements are noted. They don't automatically override placement. June's hands curled into fists. So a child can be left outside in the cold and you still send her back? Latham's eyes finally lifted. Ma'am, you're not part of this process. Ryder's voice stayed calm, but it cut. She's part of what happened. Latham's mouth thinned. I'm not here to debate feelings. I'm here to follow policy. Tank's chest rose slowly. Policy left her at a bus stop. Karen's smile widened, satisfied that the room was heating up in exactly the way she wanted. Take her, she said to Latham. This has gone on long enough. Latham stepped toward the hallway door to room 3. The guard moved automatically. You can't go back there without authorization. Latham held up her badge. I have authorization. The guard glanced at the officer. The officer hesitated, just a flicker. June moved before anyone could stop her, stepping between Latham and the hallway. You are not walking into that room and telling her she's going back with Karen. Latham's eyes narrowed. Move. June didn't. Not without a court order. Karen snapped. Who do you think you are? June's voice didn't shake. Someone who heard a child say, please don't let him in. Latham turned to the officer, impatience rising. Remove her from the hallway. The officer's face hardened. No. Latham blinked. Excuse me? I'm not removing a witness, the officer said, and I'm not sending a child back tonight without documenting everything properly. Latham's tone sharpened. Officer, this is not your decision. The officer looked at her. Then put it in writing, on camera, that you're ordering return tonight after abandonment, bruising, and a fear statement. Karen's smile faltered. Latham's fingers tightened around her tablet. Fine, she said, cold. I'll put it in the file. She stepped around June anyway, trying to angle for the door. And right then, the automatic doors whooshed again. A woman walked in, fast, purposeful, dark blazer, no hesitation in her stride. She didn't look at the bikes like they were a threat. She looked at the badge on Latham's chest like it was a target. Hannah Cole, she said, voice clear. Attorney. Who's trying to discharge a child back to a placement she just fled from in freezing weather? Ryder exhaled once, almost silent. Latham's face tightened. This is a confidential matter. Hannah didn't slow. Then you should have kept it confidential by not leaving a child at a bus stop. Karen snapped. She's here to cause trouble. Hannah's eyes flicked to Karen like Karen was a stain. Ma'am, don't talk to me. Karen's mouth fell open. Hannah turned to the officer. Do you have body cam footage from the encounter, the shove, the child's fear statement? Yes, the officer said. Good, Hannah replied. Then she faced Latham again. If you remove that child tonight without a court order, after a documented fear statement and potential neglect, I will file an emergency petition before sunrise and request an injunction against your agency and that placement, and I'll subpoena your call logs while I'm at it. Latham's eyes narrowed. You can't threaten. I can promise, Hannah said, calm as a blade. Karen's hands shook as she grabbed Latham's sleeve. She has to come home. She has to. You said... Hannah's head turned slightly. You said what? Karen froze. Latham yanked her sleeve away, suddenly careful. We're done here, she said, to no one in particular. Then, louder, to the officer. I'm instructing you to stand down and allow release to placement once cleared. Hannah held out her hand. Put that instruction in writing, right now. Sign it. Latham's jaw flexed. I don't need to sign anything for you. Hannah stepped closer. Then you don't remove her. The hallway door to room 3 opened a crack. June saw Mila's face in the gap, small, pale, eyes wide with fear because she could hear voices rising. Mila whispered, barely audible. June. June turned instantly, softening. I'm here. Mila's gaze flicked past June's shoulder to Karen. Karen's eyes locked on her like a hook. Mila recoiled, trembling, and the door started to close. But Karen surged forward in a sudden burst, slipping past the arguing adults like a predator through tall grass, and shoved her hand into the narrowing gap. "Don't!" Mila screamed, and the door swung wider as Karen forced it, stepping into the room before anyone could grab her. Karen's hand wedged into the crack of the door like a crowbar. The hinges squealed, the latch gave, and suddenly she was inside room 3, moving fast, too fast for someone who was just worried. "Mila," she hissed, voice tight and low, like she didn't want the hallway hearing what she was really saying. "You're coming with me." "Right now." Mila shrank back against the pillows, blanket up to her chin, eyes wild. She looked at June like a drowning person looks at the surface. June lunged between them. "Get out!" Karen didn't even look at June. Her eyes locked on the plastic bag in Mila's lap. "Give me that." Mila's arms clamped around it. "No!" Karen's hand shot out and grabbed one of the torn handles anyway, yanking hard enough that Mila slid forward on the sheets. The bag ripped more, spilling the corner of a worn paperback and that clear sleeve with folded paper inside. Mila made a sound that wasn't even a word, pure panic. June slapped Karen's wrist away. Not a punch, a block, a clear line. Karen's face twisted. "Don't touch me." "You're touching her," June snapped. Karen surged again, faster, trying to get past June's shoulder. "Mila, stop acting like this. You're embarrassing me. You want to go back to that place? Because that's where you'll end up if you keep this up." The doctor stepped in from the side, firm and loud. "Ma'am, you need to leave the room." Karen ignored him and leaned toward Mila, voice dropping into a warning only Mila would fully understand. "You hear me? You keep talking and I'll make sure you go back." Mila's lips trembled. "Please." The hallway erupted. Security rushed in first, then the officer, then Hannah right behind him. Tank and Ryder stayed in the doorway, not crossing the line, but their presence filled it. "Ma'am," the officer barked, "step away from the child, now!" Karen spun, eyes blazing. "This is my foster child. I have rights." "You don't have the right to force your way into a treatment room," the doctor said, voice hard. "Get out." Karen's gaze flicked, just once, to the cameras in the corner of the room. Then she turned the performance back on like a switch. "She's lying about everything. She's been coached. They're turning her against me." Hannah stepped forward, calm but cutting. "Ma'am, you just pushed into a hospital room and grabbed her belongings while a child begged you to stop. Keep talking. I love it when people narrate their own case." Karen pointed at her, shaking. "Who even are you?" "An attorney," Hannah said. "And unlike you, I don't have to raise my voice to be taken seriously." The officer reached for Karen's elbow. Karen jerked away and bumped the bed. Mila flinched so hard her knees pulled up automatically, like her body knew what was coming next before her brain did. That flinch changed everything. The officer saw it, the doctor saw it, security saw it. "Ma'am," the officer said again, slower now. "Step away." Karen's chin lifted. "You can't keep her from me." The doctor moved to the bedside, shielding Mila with his own body. "I absolutely can. This is my patient." June kept her eyes on Mila, voice low. "Look at me, Mila. Just look at me." Mila tried. Tears ran down her cheeks anyway. Before we continue, tell us in the comments where you're watching this from, because a lot of people think this kind of thing happens behind closed doors where no one can see. But it happened under bright hospital lights, with cameras, with badges, with professionals standing around. And it still almost happened. Security took Karen by both arms and guided her toward the door. Karen dug her heels in. "Let go of me. You have no idea what she's like." Hannah stepped closer. "The only thing we need to know is what she's like when you're near her, and we just saw it." Karen's eyes snapped to Mila one last time, and her voice went low again, venom under the sweetness. "You're going to regret this." Mila sobbed into the blanket. The officer's voice turned sharp. "That's a threat. Keep going." Karen's mouth tightened. She stopped talking, but her eyes didn't. Security pushed her out of the room. The officer followed, stopping at the threshold long enough to look back at the doctor. "Lock it down. No one enters without your approval." "Agreed," the doctor said. The door clicked shut. For a second, the room was just the hum of the heater and Mila's uneven breathing. June sat on the edge of the chair again, hands visible, steady. "You're safe," she said. "She's out." Mila shook her head, frantic. "She'll come back." "She won't," Hannah said, stepping closer but staying gentle. "Not tonight." Mila's eyes found Hannah's face. "She always comes back." Hannah's expression softened, but her voice stayed professional. Not if we do this correctly. The doctor looked at Mila. Mila, I need to ask you something. When you were outside, why didn't you go to a neighbor? Why the bus stop? Mila swallowed. Her gaze drifted to the plastic bag, ripped open now like it had been searched. She tightened her hands around what was left of it. Because the neighbors, they see, Mila whispered. And then Karen says I'm lying, and then she smiles. And then later she stopped. June didn't push, she just waited. The doctor tried again, soft. Mila, did they tell you to leave? Mila nodded fast. Did they lock you out? Hannah asked. Mila hesitated, then nodded again, smaller. She locked the door. Did you have shoes? June asked. Mila glanced at her feet in fuzzy socks. I grabbed the wrong ones, she yelled. I didn't go back. Because you were scared? June asked. Mila nodded. The doctor looked toward Hannah. We need CPS in here now. Hannah's eyes stayed on Mila. CPS is here, she said carefully, but the supervisor seems interested in getting this over with. Mila's face tightened at the word supervisor. The tablet lady, June blinked. You know her? Mila nodded, eyes dropping. She came once. Karen made me sit quiet. Derek said if I talk, he'll make sure I go back. Hannah's posture shifted. Mila, who is Derek in the home? Mila whispered. Karen's boyfriend. Does Derek live there? Hannah asked. Mila nodded again. He sleeps there. The doctor's eyes narrowed. Is he approved as part of the placement? Background check? Mila looked confused. He said don't say he lives there. He said tell the caseworker he's fixing something if she asks. June's stomach sank. Hannah turned toward the door. Officer, she called. The officer opened it a crack, staying outside the room. Yeah? Hannah kept her voice controlled, loud enough to be heard by the hallway cameras, but not so loud it would scare Mila. We have a statement that an adult male lives in the placement and instructed the child to lie about his residency. I need you to document that. Right now. The officer's eyes sharpened. Copy. He raised his body cam slightly. Mila, can you say that again for me? Just one sentence. Mila stiffened. June leaned in. Only if you can. Only if you want. Mila swallowed, then whispered toward the officer, voice shaking but clear. Derek sleeps at Karen's house and he told me to say he's just fixing stuff. The officer nodded once. Got it. He stepped back into the hallway. Hannah exhaled slowly, then looked at Mila. That's important. That means the home might not even be compliant. Mila stared at her. What? It means they may not be allowed to have you there, Hannah said simply. Mila's face didn't brighten, it tightened. They'll be mad. They can be mad somewhere else, June said. Mila's hands trembled and she finally pulled the folded paper out of the clear sleeve like she'd been saving it for a moment exactly like this. It was creased from being opened and closed too many times. The writing was childish but careful. Dates, short lines, names. Hannah leaned in. Mila, what is that? Mila's voice cracked. My paper. June's eyes widened when she saw it. It wasn't a birth certificate. It was a record. Did you write this? June asked. Mila nodded, ashamed like she'd done something wrong. I write so I don't forget. Because they say I forget? Hannah took it gently, not pulling, waiting until Mila loosened her grip voluntarily. She read the first lines, and her face changed with everyone. January. Locked out, Hannah murmured, more to herself than anyone. February. No dinner. March. Derek mad. The doctor leaned closer, reading over her shoulder. This is a log. Mila stared at the blanket. If I tell, they say I make it up, but if I write, it's real. June's throat tightened. It's real. Hannah flipped the page and stopped. Her finger froze on a line. June saw it too. A sentence Mila had written in shaky letters. Karen said the check is bigger when I take the medicine. June's voice came out flat. What medicine? Mila's eyes flicked up, scared. The sleepy one. The doctor's expression turned hard. Were you prescribed medication? Mila shrugged. Karen says I need it. She says I'm bad without it. Hannah looked at the doctor. You need to run a tox screen. Already thinking it, the doctor said. Mila's voice got smaller. When I take it, I can't wake up fast. Karen likes that. June's hand covered her own mouth for half a second, then dropped. Mila. Mila wiped her face with the blanket. Derek says, quiet kids are worth more. He said that. Hannah's eyes narrowed. Worth more how? Mila swallowed. Checks. The room went still again, but this time it was the kind of stillness that precedes action. Not fear. Decision. The doctor turned and walked to the door, opened it wider. Nurse, he called into the hallway, I want a full panel, and I want the social worker in here now. Also, no visitors, no exceptions. The nurse nodded and moved. Hannah folded Mila's paper carefully and handed it back to her. Keep it, she said. It's yours, but I'm going to photograph it with your permission. Mila hesitated. June leaned in. That doesn't take it away. It just makes a copy. Mila nodded slowly. Okay. Hannah pulled out her phone and took photos, one page at a time, careful to include timestamps and the hospital room number in the frame. Outside, raised voices bled through the door, Karen arguing, Supervisor Latham insisting, the officer refusing to be bulldozed. Then, the door opened again. The social worker stepped in, face tight, and the CPS supervisor stepped in behind her, like she owned the air. Latham's eyes swept the room, landed on Mila, then snapped to Hannah. You're interfering with an active case. Hannah didn't move. I'm preventing an unsafe discharge. Latham's voice was clipped. The placement is legal. The doctor cut in. Not in my building, not tonight. This child is under medical hold. Latham's jaw flexed. Medical hold is not custody. Hannah raised Mila's paper slightly, not waving it, just making sure it was seen. We have a child-written log indicating repeated lockouts, coercion, and medication tied to increased stipend language. We have a statement that an unapproved adult male lives in the home and instructed the child to lie. If you try to move her tonight, you're going to be answering questions in front of a judge. Latham's eyes flicked to the paper. Just a flicker. Then her face smoothed again. Children write stories. Mila's head snapped up, small voice sharp with desperation. It's not a story. The room paused. Even Latham hesitated for half a beat, like she hadn't expected the child to speak directly. Mila's breath shook, but she kept going. She says I'm lying, but I'm not. I wrote it because I'm not lying. June's eyes burned. Hannah's voice stayed calm, but it hit like a hammer. You just heard your client speak. Now do your job. Latham's lips pressed thin. I'll review the allegations. Not later, Hannah said. Now. Latham turned to the social worker. We can place her in emergency respite. Mila's body went rigid. No. June leaned in, voice soft but urgent. Mila, what's wrong with respite? Mila's eyes filled again. The big place, the loud kids. They forget your name. Latham's expression tightened as if this was inconvenient. It's temporary. Mila shook her head fast. They said temporary before. The doctor stepped between Latham and the bed, not aggressive. Final. She's not leaving my care until I'm satisfied she's safe. That includes psychological safety. That includes not sending her somewhere she associates with harm. Latham opened her mouth to push back. The officer stepped into the doorway again, body cam on, voice controlled. Supervisor Latham, I'm requesting you acknowledge on record that the child made a fear statement and alleges an unapproved adult male resides in the placement. I'm requesting an emergency protective custody decision. Latham's eyes flashed toward the camera. She didn't like that it was happening in recorded reality. Karen's voice shrieked from the hallway. She's my foster kid. You can't do this. Mila flinched at the sound of Karen's voice like it was a reflex. June tightened her jaw. Keep Karen out, she said to the officer. Please. The officer nodded once and stepped back out. Latham took a breath and leaned toward Hannah, voice low, angry and controlled. You're making this bigger than it needs to be. Hannah leaned in right back, equally low. No, you've been making it smaller than it is. Latham straightened and looked at the doctor. Fine, run your tests, but once you're done, she goes to emergency respite. Mila's fingers clamped around her paper again so hard her knuckles turned white. June watched her and made a decision without speaking it yet. Ryder saw June's face through the doorway and understood instantly that the next hours were going to decide the rest of Mila's life. And in the hallway, Karen's voice rose again, closer this time, like she was being allowed to approach the door. Open it, Karen demanded. She needs to see me, Mila whispered, barely audible. Please don't let her. Karen's voice kept coming from the hallway, sharp and insistent, like if she repeated the demand enough times the door would unlock itself. Open it. She needs to see me. This is abuse. You're isolating her from her family. Mila's shoulders rose to her ears. She squeezed her paper so tight the creases went white. June stood up slowly, putting herself between Mila and the sound. You don't have to answer her, she said low. You don't have to do anything you don't want to. Mila's eyes flicked to the door, then to June. She'll say I'm bad. June's jaw tightened. Then she's going to say it somewhere that isn't near you. In the hallway, the officer's voice cut through Karen's like a lid snapping shut. Ma'am, you're done for the night. If you approach this door again, you're leaving the building. I'm not leaving, Karen snapped. I have a supervisor right here. Supervisor Latham answered with tired impatience, like she'd already decided the outcome and just wanted everyone to stop making noise. Officer, I have authority. Let me do my job. The doctor stepped closer to the door, voice calm but immovable. Your job doesn't override my medical hold. Latham's reply came instantly. Medical holds are for medical necessity. And she has medical necessity, the doctor said. Exposure, trauma response, suspected inappropriate medication. That last word hit the hall like a dropped glass. Mila whispered, barely audible. The sleepy one. Hannah crouched so she was level with her. Mila, I need you to focus on me for 1 second. You're not in trouble. Do you know the name of the medicine? Mila shook her head, eyes shiny. It's in a bottle. Karen keeps it high. How often did she give it to you? Hannah asked. Mila hesitated, then held up fingers and lowered them again like she didn't want to count. When she's mad. When Derek's mad. When people come. June's throat tightened. When people come? Mila nodded. So I don't talk. Hannah's expression didn't change, but her voice sharpened with purpose. Doctor, we need the talk screen and a medication reconciliation. If the bottle shows up, we photograph it before anyone touches it. The doctor nodded once, already moving. Nurse, draw blood and urine. Full panel. Mark it urgent. In the hallway, Karen's tone shifted. Too bright, too performative. This is ridiculous. She has a prescription. She needs it. She has issues. If you're watching and you've ever seen someone use the word issues like a weapon to explain away cruelty, tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Because in this moment, everyone in that building could feel the difference between a kid who needs help and adults who need control. The door cracked open just enough for the nurse to slip in with a tray. Mila stiffened when she saw the needle. June noticed instantly. You can hold my sleeve, she told Mila, offering her arm. Mila grabbed it like a lifeline. The nurse kept her voice gentle. Small pinch, okay? Then it's done. Mila squeezed her eyes shut. She didn't cry out. She just held her breath like she'd learned long ago that making noise made things worse. Hannah watched the nurse label the vials with a seriousness that wasn't for show. Date, time, patient ID, chain of custody. She glanced at the doctor. I want this treated like evidence, she said. It is, the doctor replied. Mandatory report is already in progress. Outside, the argument escalated. Latham's voice. I'm instructing you to allow me access to interview the child alone. The officer's voice. Not without a hospital advocate present. She's under medical hold and she's terrified. Karen's voice. She needs to be alone. They're influencing her. Hannah's head lifted. June, she said quietly. Stay with Mila. Then she stepped into the hallway. The moment she appeared, the air changed. Latham's eyes snapped to her like she was the one problem she couldn't tap away on a tablet. You're obstructing, Latham said, clipped. Hannah didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. You just tried to force your way into a treatment room while a foster parent physically pushed through a door toward a frightened child, she said. That's on camera. Now, if you want to interview Mila, we do it properly, recorded, with a neutral advocate, and with the child's consent. Latham's jaw flexed. Children don't consent to interviews in active cases. They do when the environment is coercive, Hannah replied, and your own policy doesn't allow isolating a child in the presence of an alleged caregiver who just threatened her. You know that, which is why you're trying to rush. Karen stepped forward, eyes bright with anger. She's lying. She's always lying. She writes little notes and makes stories. Hannah turned to Karen slowly. You don't get to call it a story when a child writes it to survive you. Karen's face twisted. Excuse me? The officer shifted between them. Ma'am, back up. Latham lifted her badge slightly, like it was a shield. Officer, my directive stands. Once the child is medically cleared, she returns to placement or emergency respite. Hannah nodded once. Then we're going to get an emergency judge involved. Latham's eyes narrowed. It's the middle of the night. Hannah's gaze held. Family court has on-call procedures for emergency protection when there's imminent risk. You know that too. Karen scoffed. You think a judge is going to listen to bikers? Hannah didn't look at her. A judge is going to listen to a doctor, a police report, and lab results. If those lab results show sedatives in a child who has no verified prescription, your placement becomes a crime scene. Karen's smile faltered just for a second. Then she snapped it back into place. There's a prescription. Great, Hannah said. Produce it. Karen's eyes darted. It's at home. Then no medicine? Hannah said. And no discharge. Latham's voice went sharper. You are escalating unnecessarily. Hannah leaned in slightly. You're minimizing unnecessarily. Tank and Ryder stayed back, letting Hannah work, but they watched everything. Tank watched Karen's hands. Ryder watched Latham's face, the tiny tells, what she reacted to, what she ignored. Karen's phone buzzed again. She looked down, typed quickly, and slipped it back in her pocket like it was nothing. Ghost, leaning against the wall, murmured to Ryder, She's texting someone. Ryder's eyes didn't leave Karen. Watch the doors. 5 minutes later, the automatic doors whooshed, and a man in a hoodie walked in carrying a brown paper bag like he'd been sent on an errand. He scanned the lobby, spotted Karen, and headed straight toward her. Ryder didn't move fast. He moved smart. He stepped into the man's path, not threatening, just present. Can I help you? Ryder asked. The man blinked. I'm just dropping something off. Karen snapped, too quick. That's for me. Ryder held out his hand. Hospital policy says no outside items to a patient without staff checking it. It's not for a patient, Karen said. It's for me. The man tried to slide around. Tank appeared beside Ryder like a door shutting. The man's eyes flicked to their vests and he stopped. Lady said. The officer stepped closer, hearing the exchange. What's in the bag? The man hesitated. It's just her stuff. Karen's voice spiked. Give it to me. This is harassment. The officer held out his hand. Bag, now. The man looked at Karen like he wanted her to save him. Karen's stare told him to obey. He handed the bag to the officer. The officer peeked inside, then his face tightened. He pulled out a prescription bottle. Hannah stepped closer instantly. Don't open it, she said. Photograph it first. The officer held it up so the overhead lights caught the label. The name on it wasn't Mila's. June, from the doorway, saw the bottle and went cold. Karen's face went blank, real blank, not performance blank. That's not mine, she said too quickly. He brought the wrong. Hannah's voice stayed flat. Whose name is on the label? Karen's mouth opened. Nothing came out. The officer read it quietly, then looked at Karen. Ma'am, this doesn't match the child. Why is someone bringing you medication in a paper bag at midnight? Karen forced a laugh that sounded like it hurt. Because she doesn't like taking it. I have to be careful or she throws it out. It's prescribed. She needs it. Hannah stepped even closer, her tone sharper now. So you admit you're giving it to her? Karen snapped, defensive. She needs it. The doctor appeared in the hallway doorway like he'd been called by the word medication alone. He took one look at the bottle, then at Karen, then at Hannah. We'll be matching this against the tox screen, he said, voice hard. If it shows up in her system without verified prescription, I'm filing a report that includes the police. I'm right here, the officer said, eyes locked on Karen. Karen's hands started to shake. This is ridiculous. You people are twisting everything. She's a problem child. She lies. From room 3, Mila's small voice drifted out, trembling. That's the bottle. Everyone froze for half a beat. June whispered, Mila. Mila pushed herself up in bed, eyes fixed on the hallway, terrified but certain. That's the sleepy one. Karen's head snapped toward the door like she wanted to shout Mila back into silence. The officer stepped in front of her instantly. Don't. Hannah turned toward Latham. Supervisor, she said, calm but lethal, you can still try to move her tonight if you want. but you're going to do it with that bottle on camera, that statement on record, and a doctor willing to testify. Your choice." Latham's eyes flicked to the bottle, then to Karen, then to the officer's body cam. For the first time, her posture shifted, not convinced but cautious. "This needs review," Latham said, voice tighter. "I will contact my director." Hannah nodded. "Do it, and I'm contacting an on-call judge." Karen's voice cracked, louder now, desperation breaking through the rage. "She can't stay here. She has to come home." The doctor didn't blink. "Not to you." Karen surged forward anyway, like she was about to make one more attempt to reach the room. The officer grabbed her forearm. "That's enough." Karen jerked away and screamed, "Let go of me!" The lobby turned. Security moved in. The officer's tone dropped into something final. "Ma'am, you're being detained for trespass in a restricted area, interference, and for attempting to intimidate a child witness." Karen's face twisted. "You can't." The officer started to cuff her, and at that exact moment, the nurse came out of the lab hallway holding a printout, eyes wide, moving fast. She went straight to the doctor and whispered something that made his face go hard and still. The doctor looked up at Hannah and the officer and said very clearly, "The preliminary tox screen is positive." Mila's breath caught. Karen's eyes went huge. The officer's grip tightened on the cuffs as the doctor added, "And it matches the class of drug in that bottle." The lobby didn't get louder after the doctor said it. It got quieter, not peaceful, not calm. Quiet like the second before something breaks. "The preliminary tox screen is positive," the doctor repeated, slower this time, so there was no way anyone could pretend they misheard. "Sedative class, same category as the medication in that bottle." Karen's mouth opened and closed like her brain was skipping over the part where consequences lived. Her hands were half raised, cuffs dangling from the officer's grip, and she looked around like she expected someone to rescue her from reality. "That's impossible," she said, voice too high. "She's lying. The test is wrong." She ate something. She didn't eat anything," June snapped before she could stop herself. "She was at a bus stop for 5 hours. Karen whipped her head toward June, eyes wild. "You did this. You're poisoning her. You're—" "Ma'am," the officer cut in, flat and final. "Turn around." Karen jerked back like she'd been slapped. "You can't arrest me over a— He didn't argue. He simply guided her wrists behind her back and clicked the cuffs shut. The sound made Mila gasp from inside room 3. June turned instantly toward the door, voice softening. "Mila, you're okay. You're safe. It's not you in trouble." Mila's voice came thin through the crack. "Is she mad?" June swallowed. "She's not getting near you." In the hallway, Latham's face tightened in a way that wasn't sympathy. It was irritation, like the situation had become harder to manage. "That's a medical result," she said sharply. "It doesn't establish wrongdoing." Hannah looked at her without blinking. "It establishes that a child has a sedative in her system and the caregiver just had a bottle delivered in a paper bag at midnight with a name that doesn't match the child." Latham's jaw flexed. "Preliminary screens can be—" "Confirmed," the doctor cut in. "We're running confirmation, but I'm already filing the mandatory report, and I'm already documenting the child's statements." The officer guided Karen toward a chair, keeping her away from the hallway. Karen twisted, trying to see the door to room 3. "Tell her to stop," she snapped. "Tell her to stop lying. Mila, you hear me?" The officer stepped closer, blocking her line of sight. "You're done." Karen leaned forward anyway, voice dropping low like a threat trying to hide under a whisper. "You think this saves you? It doesn't. You still go back. You always go back." Hannah's head turned instantly. "Officer, that's intimidation of a child witness." The officer didn't hesitate. He looked at Karen, and his voice turned colder. "You just upgraded your problems." Karen's eyes darted. "I didn't say anything." Ghost's phone lifted slightly. "Got it," he murmured, recording. The man in the hoodie, the errand runner, stood off to the side, frozen, hands empty now, eyes flicking between the cuffs and the badge like he'd just realized he'd been used. The officer turned to him. "You. Name, ID." The man swallowed. Caleb Morris. "I didn't do anything. She texted me. She said, bring a bag, that's it." "Who is she?" the officer asked. Caleb nodded toward Karen without looking directly at her like she might bite. "Her," Karen snapped. "Don't you dare." The officer held up a hand without even glancing at her. "Caleb, Did you know what you were bringing? Caleb shook his head fast. No, I swear. She said it was her stuff. She said if I didn't do it, she'd... He stopped, mouth tight. She'd what? Hannah asked, calm. Caleb swallowed. She'd tell Derek I was running my mouth. Tank's eyes narrowed. So Derek's still pulling strings. The officer's radio crackled at his shoulder. Someone from patrol asking about Derek's status. The officer answered without taking his eyes off Caleb. Derek is in custody. Assault on an officer. Interference. Karen's face twitched at the name Derek like it was a pressure point. Caleb's eyes widened. He got arrested? Yes, the officer said. Now answer the question. Why deliver a medication bottle at midnight? Caleb's lips trembled. I didn't know it was medication. The officer held up the bottle in an evidence bag the nurse had provided, label facing out under the lobby lights. You didn't see this? Caleb flinched. It was inside the brown bag. I didn't open it. Hannah leaned slightly toward him. Caleb, listen carefully. If you're lying, you're in trouble. If you're telling the truth, you have a chance to help a child and keep yourself out of a much bigger mess. Who gave you the bag? Caleb hesitated, then said it fast like ripping off a bandage. A guy in a truck outside their house. Derek's friend. I don't know his name. Where? The officer demanded. Caleb pointed toward the automatic doors. Parked near the entrance. He watched me walk in. Ryder's head snapped toward the glass. Tank moved first, stepping toward the doors with purpose. Ryder followed, not running, just fast enough to matter. Ghost stayed inside, camera up, recording both the movement and Karen's reaction. Outside, the parking lot was lit in cold white. A pickup idled near the curb, and as Tank pushed through the doors, the truck lurched forward like it had been waiting for a signal. Hey! Tank shouted. The truck accelerated. Ryder didn't chase into the lane. He memorized. Plate, make, sticker on the tailgate, a dent above the rear wheel. Ghost, still inside, zoomed his camera through the glass and caught the plate as the truck swung out of the lot. The officer saw the movement and barked into his radio. Be advised, possible associate vehicle just fled hospital lot. Pickup, dark color, plate. He read it off as Ghost fed him the numbers. Attempt locate, driver may be connected. Latham's eyes flicked to the doors, then back to her tablet, fingers moving faster now. For the first time, her posture shifted from dismissive to defensive. This is turning into a criminal matter, she said tightly. It already is, Hannah replied. Now we do the part where you stop pretending it's behavioral. Latham's mouth thinned. I'm calling my director. Good, Hannah said. Put it on speaker. Latham didn't. Karen stared at Latham like she'd just realized the supervisor wasn't a shield anymore. You said this wouldn't happen, she hissed, voice cracking. You said if she just stayed quiet. Hannah's head turned slowly. Say that again. Karen snapped, her mouth shut. The officer stepped closer. Ma'am, you're under arrest. You will stop talking. Karen's eyes burned with panic now, not arrogance. She needs her medicine, she tried again, desperate. She needs it or she'll what? The doctor asked, voice ice. Be awake? Be able to speak? Karen swallowed hard. Hannah turned to the doctor. Can you place a psychiatric consult and document her fear response to the caregiver's presence? I already did, the doctor said, and I'm documenting that the caregiver forced entry into a restricted treatment room and attempted to take the child's belongings. The social worker, clipboard tight in her hands, added, and I'm filing a report that the child described medication being used to silence her during visits. I'll put it in writing tonight. Latham's eyes flashed. You're going beyond scope. The social worker didn't blink. I'm doing my job. Mila's door opened a little wider. The nurse stepped out, face tight. She's asking if she's going back. June moved to the doorway instantly. Tell her no. The nurse hesitated, looking at the doctor. The doctor answered without hesitation. Tell her she's staying here. No discharge tonight. June leaned into the room, voice low and steady. Mila, you're not going back tonight. You're staying in the hospital. I'm right here. Mila's voice came out broken. Promise. June swallowed, then made the only promise that mattered. I promise I'm not leaving you. A beat. Then Mila whispered, She'll come. June kept her tone firm. She can't. In the lobby, Karen twisted in her cuffs, face red, tears finally spilling. Not regret, not empathy, just the ugly frustration of losing control. You don't know what you're doing, she screamed. She ruins homes. She ruins people. She makes them look bad, and then she... Hannah's voice cut through it like a blade. "No, you ruin children, and then you call them bad so you can sleep at night." Karen's scream turned into a sob, then back into a scream. "I fed her. I clothed her. I took her when no one else would." The doctor didn't move. "And you drugged her?" Karen's head snapped toward him. "I didn't. The lab says otherwise," he replied. The officer nodded to a second unit that had arrived quietly. "Take her," he said. Karen was led away, still shouting, still trying to throw her voice down the hallway toward Mila's door like a hook. As soon as she was out of sight, the air shifted again. Not fixed, not safe, but less poisoned. Latham exhaled sharply as if she'd been inconvenienced. "We will arrange emergency respite in the morning." Mila's voice, small but clear, drifted from inside the room. "No." Latham's head turned toward the door, annoyance tightening her face. "We can't hold her here indefinitely." Hannah stepped forward. "You're right. So you'll do a safe placement, not the big place where they forget your name." Latham scoffed. "That's not how it works." "It is tonight," Hannah said, "because tonight you have a child with sedatives in her system and an arrested caregiver. If you send her to a chaotic group intake facility, you're placing her back into harm, and you know it." Latham's eyes flicked. "Do you have an alternative?" June's throat tightened. She felt Ryder's gaze on her from across the lobby. June didn't raise her voice. "I do." Everyone turned. June looked at the doctor first. "If she can't stay here long, she needs a quiet place. One adult, one room, no screaming, no strangers in and out." Latham's lips tightened. "And you are offering what exactly?" June swallowed. "I'm offering to be a temporary emergency caregiver, if the system can do it legally. I'll submit to checks, whatever you want. I'll sign whatever needs signing. But I'm not letting her disappear into a place that terrifies her after what she just survived." Ryder didn't speak. He didn't need to. The club behind him shifted, quietly, like a wall deciding where it stood. Latham stared at June like she'd suggested stealing a car. "You can't just," Hannah cut in. "Actually, you can. Emergency kinship-like placements happen when a child's safety requires it. You can do a temporary protective placement with a vetted adult under supervision, especially with hospital documentation and law enforcement involved." Latham's eyes flashed with irritation at being corrected. The officer folded his arms. "If you don't, I'm documenting that you refused a calm, safe placement option while pushing a distressed child toward a high-traffic facility she fears." The social worker added, "And I'll document it too." Latham's fingers tightened around her tablet so hard her knuckles whitened. "Fine," she said, clipped. "We will consider an emergency caregiver option, but she will not be released to a motorcycle club." June's voice stayed steady. "Not to a club. To me. To one person, in a normal house." Hannah nodded. "And we do it by the book, with conditions." Latham's gaze slid to Hannah. "You're enjoying this." Hannah's answer was calm. "I'm protecting a child." Latham's phone finally rang. She stepped aside and answered in a low voice. Her face changed as she listened, less authority, more caution. When she hung up, she returned with a new tightness around her eyes. "My director wants updates, and law enforcement wants access to the placement address tonight." The officer nodded. "Good. Because I'm requesting a welfare check for any other children in that home." Immediately, Latham's jaw clenched. "We don't have confirmation there are other children." June's voice came from the doorway, quiet but firm. "Mila said kids before. Plural." The officer's radio crackled again. Dispatch confirming units en route to Karen's address. The officer spoke into it, short and precise. "Advise responding units. Suspected child endangerment, possible illegal medication administration, possible unapproved resident. Use caution." Mila's nurse appeared again, eyes on June. "She's asking if Karen is coming back." June stepped into the room fully for a moment, then came back out, shutting the door gently. Her face was tight. "She wants to see what happens next," she said, voice low. "She thinks if she can hear everything, she can prepare." Hannah's expression softened. "Tell her she doesn't have to be on guard tonight." June nodded, but she didn't look convinced. "She doesn't know how." The lobby fell into a tense rhythm. Officers on radios, the doctor dictating notes, the social worker filling forms, Latham typing like she could outrun responsibility with a tablet. Ryder stayed near the door to room 3, not as a threat, but as a promise. Ghost leaned in close, voice low. If they find other kids in that house, Ryder's jaw tightened, then this gets bigger whether Latham likes it or not. The officer's radio crackled again, different tone this time, urgent. Unit 12, dispatch said. Responding unit at the placement address requests immediate supervisor. They advise. They found something. The officer's posture snapped tighter. What did they find? A pause. A breath. Then the voice came back, lower. They found another child. June's hand flew to her mouth. Hannah's eyes narrowed, and from inside room 3, Mila's small voice drifted out, shaking like she already knew the answer to a question nobody had asked yet. Is it one of mine? The officer didn't move for a beat after dispatch said it. His hand hovered near his radio like he didn't trust what he'd heard. They found another child, he repeated, eyes hard. Age? The voice on the radio came back tight. Approximately 6, male. Responding unit says he was inside the placement address, appears neglected. They're requesting a supervisor and medical. June's knees went weak for a second. She gripped the doorframe of room 3, staring at nothing. Hannah's face sharpened into pure focus. Officer, she said, low but urgent, you need that unit to secure the scene, identify any other minors, and get a search warrant if they find evidence of more children or controlled substances. The officer was already speaking into the mic. Copy. Secure scene. Confirm if any other minors present. Do not allow anyone access to the home. EMS if needed. I'm notifying a detective. From inside the room, Mila's voice trembled through the crack in the door. Is it one of mine? June stepped in fast, closing the gap behind her so Mila didn't have to hear the hallway swell. Mila, she said softly, look at me. Mila's eyes were huge. She clutched her paper to her chest like it could stop bad news from entering the room. Is it the little boy? Mila whispered. The one who hides? June swallowed. Tell me his name. Mila's lips shook. Eli. Hannah stepped just inside the room, staying near the threshold. Mila, she said gently, did Eli live in Karen's house with you? Mila nodded fast, panic building. He's little. He cries at night. Derek says shut up or... She stopped, breath hitching. He puts him in the laundry. The doctor's expression went hard. In the laundry? Mila nodded again. He says it's quiet there. He says it's a lesson. June felt something hot rise behind her eyes. She blinked it down and kept her voice steady. Mila, is Eli hurt? I don't know, Mila whispered. He has marks sometimes. He says he fell. Karen says he fell. Hannah turned back toward the hallway, voice suddenly professional and sharp. Officer, we have a possible second victim. The child says another minor in the home was confined as punishment. That needs to be documented. The officer's reply came instantly from outside the door. Copy. Before we continue, tell us in the comments where you are watching this from, because a lot of people still believe this system only breaks down in rare, extreme cases. But this started with one freezing bus stop, and it already led to a second child behind a locked door. The doctor stepped to Mila's bedside again, tone calm on purpose. Mila, you did the right thing speaking up. You hear me? Mila stared at her paper. They said it makes it worse. It makes it stop, June said quietly. It makes it stop for you and for Eli. Mila's lower lip trembled. Karen will be mad. June's voice didn't shake. Karen can't get to you. Mila's eyes flicked up. Promise? June nodded. Promise? In the hallway, the CPS supervisor's tablet clicked as she typed faster, like speed could undo what the radio had just revealed. Latham's posture had changed, less authority, more damage control. This is now a multi-child investigation, Hannah said, stepping out to face her. You don't get to rush anything. You don't get to send Mila to a facility she fears. You don't get to keep this internal. Latham's mouth tightened. We are handling... No, Hannah cut in. You were handling it until it turned into an arrest, a positive talk screen, and a second child found in the same home. Now it becomes oversight. The social worker joined them, clipboard hugged tight. I want a different supervisor assigned, she said flatly. Tonight. Latham's eyes flashed. That's not your decision. It will be the judge's, Hannah replied. Because I'm filing an emergency petition right now. The officer came back toward them, body cam still on. Supervisor Latham, he said, controlled, I need you on record acknowledging you were prepared to return a sedated child to a home where another child was just found neglected. Latham's jaw flexed. We didn't have... On record, the officer repeated. Latham's eyes flicked to the camera and she swallowed the rest. I acknowledge new information has emerged. Hannah nodded once. Good. Now do the correct thing with the information. Across the lobby, Karen sat cuffed, held by a second officer. Her face had shifted from rage to something tighter, fear mixed with calculation. She kept trying to crane her neck toward room 3, like she could still reach Mila with her voice if she found the right angle. She's lying, Karen muttered again and again, but it sounded less convincing every time. She lies. She lies. The errand runner, Caleb, sat with a third officer taking a statement, his hands shaking as he explained the truck, the bag, the instructions. Every few seconds he looked up like he expected Derek to burst through the doors and make him pay for talking. Ryder stood near the wall, silent, watching the entrance. Ghost stood beside him, phone tucked away now but still ready. Tank was a few steps behind, eyes scanning everything with the same steady focus he'd had at the bus stop. The radio crackled again. Unit 12, dispatch said. Responding unit advises they entered after hearing crying. The home was in disarray. The child was alone in a back room. They located a locked interior door. They are requesting a warrant due to possible additional occupants or evidence. The officer closed his eyes for half a second, then opened them. Copy. Hold the scene. I'm getting a detective and a warrant request started. June turned back to Mila, who was shaking again. Mila's eyes weren't just scared, they were guilty, like she believed she'd done something wrong by surviving. Hey, June said soft. Look at me. Mila tried, then failed. Her gaze darted to the door again. If they find Eli, they'll take him to the big place. Hannah stepped back into the room, lowering her voice. Mila, listen. If Eli is safe enough, he may be brought to a hospital for evaluation. If not, he'll go somewhere temporary. But we are going to fight for a quiet placement for you. And now, for him too. Mila whispered. They forget your name there. June's throat tightened. Not if we don't let them. The doctor looked at Hannah. Her vitals are stabilizing, but her anxiety spikes with every mention of discharge. I can extend observation for psychological safety. Do it, Hannah said immediately. Document it clearly. The doctor nodded. All ready. A nurse slipped in with a small tray. Juice, crackers, a warm roll. Mila stared at it like it was a trick. June took one cracker first, ate it, then offered the tray again. See? Safe. Mila hesitated, then took a tiny bite, chewing slowly. Her eyes stayed on the door even while she ate. Hannah crouched beside the bed. Mila, I need to ask you something important. Did Karen ever tell you not to talk about other kids? Mila nodded once, fast. She said it's private. Did she ever move kids in and out? Hannah asked. Mila swallowed. Sometimes there's new ones, sometimes they're gone. Karen says they couldn't behave. June's hands curled into fists at her sides. Hannah kept her tone even. Do you remember any names besides Eli? Mila stared at her paper like it might answer for her. Sophie, she whispered, and Jay. Where did they go? Hannah asked. Mila shook her head. Karen says don't ask. The doctor straightened. That indicates pattern. We're escalating the mandatory report. In the hallway, Latham paced, phone pressed to her ear now, voice low, controlled. Every few seconds she glanced toward Karen as if she was deciding how much distance to put between herself and a placement that was turning toxic on camera. Hannah stepped out, pulled her own phone, and started dictating. Not loud, not dramatic, just fast, precise, and deadly in its clarity. Names, times, the bus stop, the abandonment statement, the forced entry into the treatment room, the sedative screen, the bottle delivered at midnight, the second child discovered at the placement address. The officer listened for a moment, then nodded once. I'll attach my report and body cam. And I want the hospital to preserve their security footage. The social worker added, I'll add my note about the child flinching fear statement and the caregiver's behavior. Do it tonight, Hannah said. Time matters. A new officer arrived in plain clothes, detective energy even without the badge showing. He spoke to the first officer briefly, then to the doctor, then to Hannah. He didn't look at the bikes like they were a circus. He looked at the facts like they were a map. You're telling me you have a child with sedatives in her system, an unapproved adult male in the home, a caregiver arrested, and another minor located neglected at the address, he said, plus a fleeing associate vehicle. Yes, the officer replied. The detective nodded once. Warrant request will move. Latham tried to step in. This is a foster placement matter. The detective's eyes slid to her, unimpressed. Not anymore. Latham's mouth tightened. Inside room 3, Mila's breathing finally started to slow. Not calm, but less jagged. June sat close enough that Mila could reach her without having to ask. Mila kept one hand on her paper and the other on June's sleeve. June, Mila whispered. Yeah? If Eli comes, will he be mad at me? Mila asked, voice cracking. Because I talked. June swallowed. No, honey, he's going to be safer because you talked. Mila's eyes filled again. He cries when Derek... Stop, June said softly, not harsh, protective. You don't have to carry the pictures right now. Let the adults carry it. Mila tried to nod, but her chin trembled. Hannah stepped back into the doorway with Latham behind her. Latham's posture was different now, less commanding, more contained, like she'd been told to stop improvising. We're arranging emergency placement, Latham said, clipped. Temporary. Hannah didn't let her frame it like a favor. With June as the emergency caregiver candidate, she corrected, pending immediate checks. Latham's eyes flicked to June. You will be background checked. Do it, June said. Home visit, Latham added. Now, June replied. Fingerprinting, Latham continued. Tonight, June said. Latham blinked once, irritated at the lack of resistance. There will be conditions, Hannah nodded, and there will be documentation, every step. Mila stared at Latham, body stiffening again. Tablet lady. Latham's expression tightened as if the nickname bothered her more than it should. Mila, we are here to help. Mila's voice came out small, brutal. You didn't. Silence hit the room. Latham opened her mouth, then closed it, then tried again. We have to follow procedure. Hannah's tone stayed calm. Then follow it in a way that doesn't harm children. The nurse returned with an update for the doctor, voice low. The doctor nodded and looked at Hannah. We'll have confirmatory results later, he said, but the preliminary is enough for a protective hold. Hannah nodded. Good. The officer's radio crackled again. Unit 12, responding unit at placement advises the child located is conscious but dehydrated. They are transporting him for evaluation. June's hand flew to her chest. They're bringing him here. The officer nodded, already listening. Copy. Which hospital? A pause, then dispatch answered. Same facility. ETA 15 minutes. Mila's eyes widened, fear and hope colliding so hard she looked dizzy. Eli? June leaned in, voice steady. It might be Eli. If it is, we'll be right here. Mila's fingers tightened around June's sleeve. He'll be scared. I know, June whispered, so we'll be steady. In the lobby, the detective spoke with the officer again, then turned and looked straight at Ryder. You the one who found her? Ryder nodded. The detective held his gaze. You did the right thing. Ryder didn't smile. Keep her safe, he said, and keep the other kids safe too. The detective nodded once. That's the plan. Time moved in thick minutes after that. Forms, signatures, phone calls, quiet instructions. Latham arranged the emergency caregiver process with stiff efficiency, now that the situation had outgrown her control. Hannah stayed close, watching every line, every checkbox, every attempt to rush something that shouldn't be rushed. June sat with Mila until Mila's eyelids started to droop from exhaustion, not medicine. Mila fought it at first, like sleep was dangerous. Then she whispered, barely audible, If I sleep, will you still be here? June answered without hesitation. Yes. Mila's grip loosened a fraction. Her breathing softened. She fell asleep with her paper tucked under one arm like a shield. June didn't move. In the hallway, the sound of wheels on tile grew louder, gurney approaching, voices lowered, nurses directing. June's head lifted, eyes fixed on the door, heart beating hard. The room stayed quiet except for Mila's slow breathing as the gurney rolled closer and closer outside. The gurney rolled in so fast the wheels squealed on the tile. 2 paramedics pushed it through the automatic doors with a nurse walking backward, guiding them toward pediatrics. On the stretcher sat a little boy wrapped in a hospital blanket that was too big for him. His lips were cracked, his eyes were dry and distant. In one hand, he held a plastic dinosaur by the tail, like it was an anchor. "Male, about 6, the medic said. "Dehydrated, cold exposure, found alone inside the placement address. Child was behind an interior locked door." June's stomach dropped. Room 4, 2 doors down from Mila. Close enough to feel dangerous, far enough to keep them from seeing each other. As they turned the gurney, the boy's eyes flicked toward Mila's door, and his whole body tightened like he expected someone to appear and drag him back. June kept her hands visible. "Hey," she said softly. "You're safe. You're in a hospital." He didn't answer. He just gripped the dinosaur harder. Hannah came up beside June, voice low. "Don't push him. He's shut down." They moved him into room 4, and the doctor shut the door behind them. The hallway went quiet for a beat, like everyone was listening for what the system would do next. June went back to Mila. Mila was asleep with her paper tucked under the blanket, one small hand still wrapped around June's sleeve. June didn't move. She just listened. A faint sound slipped under the door from room 4, one soft whimper. Mila's eyes opened instantly. "He's here," she whispered. June swallowed. "Another child is here, yes." "Eli?" Mila asked, panic rising. June touched the blanket gently. "Let the doctor check him first." Mila stared past June, trying to see through walls. "He'll be scared." "I know," June said. "Before we continue, tell us in the comments where you're watching this from, because this stopped being one kid at a bus stop. The minute they opened that house, it became something bigger." In room 4, Dr. Patel started fluids and kept his voice calm on purpose. A hospital advocate named Tessa stood with Hannah, making sure no one rushed the child, no one cornered him, no one turned questions into threats. "Sweetheart," Tessa said softly, "you can say stop any time, okay?" The boy blinked once. "Can you tell me your name?" Dr. Patel asked. His eyes flicked to the door like he expected Karen to burst in. "No one who hurt you can come in here," Dr. Patel said. "Not tonight." A long pause. Then, barely audible, the boy whispered, "Eli." A nurse stepped out and murmured it to June in the hallway. He said Eli. June's breath left her in one hard exhale. She slipped back into Mila's room and knelt beside the bed. "Mila," she said quiet. "It's Eli." Mila's face crumpled. She clapped both hands over her mouth like crying would get her punished. A broken sound still escaped. "He was behind the door," Mila whispered. June didn't lie. "Yes." Mila shook her head fast. "Derek put him there." June felt her own throat tighten. "Derek can't touch either of you now." Mila's eyes darted to the hallway. "Can I see him? Just 1 second?" June looked toward the doctor's station, then back at Mila. "Let me ask." A minute later, Dr. Patel came to the doorway, eyes tired but steady. "1 minute," he said. "No contact if either child gets overwhelmed, and if either says stop, we stop." Mila nodded so hard her hair shook. June guided Mila into the hall. Room 4's door opened a crack, and Eli's eyes lifted from his dinosaur. He saw Mila and went still. "Mila," he whispered, like he wasn't sure he was allowed to say her name. Mila's eyes flooded again. "Eli," she breathed. Eli's fingers trembled around the toy. "Is Derek here?" Mila shook her head fast. "No." June crouched between them, voice steady. "He can't get to you. You're safe." Eli stared at June like he'd never heard an adult promise something and mean it. Then he reached one small hand out, not even fully, just enough for his fingertips to touch Mila's blanket sleeve. Mila leaned forward and touched his fingers back, gentle like glass. "Okay," Dr. Patel said softly. "That's enough for now." Mila didn't argue. She just backed away, eyes locked on Eli like she was memorizing him to make sure he didn't disappear. Back in Mila's room, June shut the door and leaned against it for a second, breathing through the weight in her chest. In room 4, Eli answered questions in fragments, eyes fixed on his dinosaur. "Who took care of you?" Dr. Patel asked. "Karen," Eli whispered. "And Derek?" Hannah asked. Eli's fingers tightened. "Loud." "What happens when he's loud?" Tessa asked. Eli stared at the dinosaur. "You be quiet." "And if you're not?" Hannah asked. "Laundry," Eli whispered again, like saying it twice made it more true and more dangerous. Dr. Patel's jaw tightened. "Was the door locked?" Eli nodded. "Key?" "Who had the key?" Hannah asked. "Karen." Tessa leaned closer, voice gentle. "Did you get medicine?" Eli blinked slow. "Sleepy." "When?" Dr. Patel asked. Eli's eyes flicked up, fear sharp. "When people come, papers, smiles. Karen says be good. Derek says don't talk." Hannah stepped into the hallway and relayed it quietly to the officer and the detective. The detective's face hardened and his phone rang almost immediately. He answered, listened, then lowered his voice. "Warrant just hit. Patrol found a locked cabinet, multiple prescription bottles. Some names don't match any known kids. They found keys on a hook labeled laundry and closet, and a notebook, like accounting, dates, names, notes." Hannah's eyes narrowed. "Notes like what?" The detective's voice went colder. "Words like quiet, problem, and dollar amounts. And there's a back room with an extra mattress, more than one." June felt heat in her chest that had nowhere to go. In the lobby, Karen had been moved farther down the hall, away from pediatrics, but her voice still tried to travel. Derek was already gone in cuffs. Caleb was giving a statement with shaking hands. Latham stepped in, tablet tight in her hand. "This is still a child welfare matter." The detective looked at her like she'd just insulted him. "It's a criminal investigation now." Latham's phone started ringing nonstop. She stepped aside, answered, and her posture shifted as she listened. Less authority, more fear of someone above her. When she came back, she tried to grab control with procedure. "Emergency caregiver placement is not approved," she said to June, clipped. "Mila will go to a licensed respite facility once medically cleared." June stared at her. "No." Latham's eyes narrowed. "That's not your decision." Hannah stepped forward, calm and sharp. "It will be, because the doctor is holding the child medically, and I'm calling the on-call judge." Latham scoffed, until Hannah's phone rang back and she put it on speaker. "This is Judge Ramirez," a calm voice said. "Counsel, summarize." The lobby went still. Hannah delivered it fast. Child abandoned in freezing weather. Fear statement. Caregiver and boyfriend arrested. Sedatives in Mila's system consistent with the bottle. Second child found behind a locked door. Dehydrated. Reporting the same sleepy medication used before visits. Warrant active. Evidence being collected. Dr. Patel confirmed the hold. The detective confirmed the investigation. Then the judge spoke again, voice firm. "Supervisor, protective custody is granted. The hospital hold remains. And if there is a willing adult who can pass immediate checks, I authorize temporary placement for Mila under conditions. Vet her tonight." June's pulse hammered. Hannah said, "June Miller is willing. Full checks. Home visit. Conditions." The judge paused. "Any specific safety objection?" Latham swallowed. "No specific." "Then proceed," the judge said. "No facility intake tonight. The child will not be re-traumatized for convenience." From the bed, Mila whispered, small and trembling, "I don't want the big place." The judge's voice softened just enough to be heard. "Mila, you won't go there tonight." Mila froze like she'd never heard an adult with power say her name with respect. The call ended. Latham's face stayed tight, but her options were gone. "We will start checks," she said, clipped, already typing. June nodded once. "Do it now." The officer approached June with a small notepad. "I'll need your ID and current address," he said, professional. "And I'm advising you. If you take her, you keep every call logged, every visit supervised, and you don't let anyone from that home near her." June handed over her ID without hesitation. "Whatever it takes." The detective's phone buzzed again. He listened, then his eyes lifted to Hannah. "They found a binder labeled placements," he said quietly. "Names we don't have on file." June went cold, and in room 3, Mila stared at her paper, voice barely more than air. "There were more," Mila said it like she was confessing to something. There were more. June felt her chest tighten. More kids? Mila nodded, eyes fixed on the paper in her hands like it was the only place the truth could safely live. Not always. Sometimes. Karen would say, "We're helping," and Derek would laugh. In the hallway, the detective's voice stayed low but carried weight. They found a binder labeled placements, names we don't have on file. Hannah's face didn't move, but her eyes sharpened. Unlicensed placements? Or kids moved around without proper tracking, the detective replied. We'll know once we inventory. Latham's fingers flew over her tablet like she could type her way out of consequences. We are cooperating with law enforcement, she said stiffly, loud enough for everyone to hear. The detective looked at her once. Start by not touching anything at that house, not one file, not one bottle. Latham's jaw flexed. I understand. June didn't. Not anymore. Inside room 3, Mila was sitting up now, awake and rigid, listening to every sound through the door like it was a weather report for danger. June lowered her voice. Mila, can you tell me about the other kids? Just what you remember, no pressure. Mila swallowed. Sophie was little, she had yellow hair. Her eyes darted to the door, then back. Karen said she was too much, then she was gone. Gone where? June asked. Mila shook her head. Karen said she went back, but she didn't pack. June's throat tightened. Anyone else? Mila's fingers fidgeted with the edge of her paper. Jay was older. He tried to run. Derek caught him. Mila's voice got smaller. After that, Jay didn't talk. He just stared. The doctor stepped in quietly, keeping his tone steady. Mila, are you feeling dizzy? Sick? Mila shook her head. Just tired. The doctor nodded once. That's okay. You're safe here. Mila's eyes lifted. For how long? June answered before anyone else could soften it into a lie. Long enough for the right people to do the right thing. Mila stared at her like she wasn't sure adults were allowed to say that. In room 4, Eli was finally sipping water through a straw. He watched the door like it was a predator. Tessa, the advocate, stayed gentle. Eli, can you tell me if you ever saw other kids at the house? Eli's eyes flicked toward the ceiling. He nodded, tiny and quick. How many? Tessa asked. Eli shrugged, then held up 3 fingers, then hesitated and lifted one more. 4. Dr. Patel's face tightened. Different children at different times? Eli nodded. Some go, new ones come. Did Karen call anyone when they left? Hannah asked from the doorway. Eli's voice came out flat, practiced. Karen says paper and money and smiles. Hannah stepped back into the hall and spoke quietly to the detective. The detective's expression turned darker. We've got enough now to broaden the scope, he said. Not just endangerment, not just illegal medication. Trafficking is a heavy word, but the binder, the accounting, the rotating kids. This is going to get ugly. Ryder's jaw tightened hard enough to show muscle. Then make it official, he said. Don't let it get buried. The detective nodded once. That's why I'm calling state. Before we continue, tell us in the comments where you're watching this from. Because the scary part isn't that people like Karen exist. The scary part is how long they can operate when everyone around them chooses the easiest option instead of the right one. Latham turned toward June, voice clipped. You're being considered for emergency caregiver placement. You will need to submit to fingerprinting tonight, a home inspection, and conditions of supervision. June didn't hesitate. Yes. Any firearms in the home? Latham asked, tone purely procedural. No, June said immediately. Any other adults living with you? Latham pressed. June answered cleanly. No, just me. Employment? Latham asked, eyes on her screen. June gave it. Address, work contact, everything. Hannah watched Latham's questions like a hawk, ready to cut in if the supervisor tried to twist anything. The officer stood nearby, body cam on, documenting. Meanwhile, Karen sat cuffed in a chair down the hall, and the longer she sat, the more her fear hardened into rage again. She stopped crying, started watching. When Latham walked past, Karen hissed, "You said she'd come back." Latham didn't answer. Karen's face twisted. "You're going to let a stranger take her? That's your plan?" Hannah turned her head slightly. "A stranger who kept her alive tonight." Karen lunged in her chair as far as the cuffs allowed. "She's a liar. She ruins homes." The officer stepped between them. "Ma'am, stop!" Karen spat words like poison anyway. "Mila, you hear me? You're going to regret this." In room 3, Mila flinched at the sound of her name. June stepped to the door and shut it tighter, like wood could block venom. Mila whispered, "She's still here." June nodded. Not for long. The detective walked back in, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in low, urgent fragments. When he hung up, he looked at Hannah. "State investigators taking over," he said. "They want the hospital footage preserved and everyone's statements collected tonight. They're also running Karen and Derek through prior complaints." Hannah's eyes narrowed. "Prior complaints?" The detective's mouth tightened. "Yeah, there are notes. Unfounded. Closed. Multiple." June's stomach sank. "So people tried to report." "Looks like it," the detective said. Mila's fingers trembled around her paper. "I tried." June leaned in. "And tonight, someone listened." Mila's eyes filled. "Because you saw me." June didn't soften it into a speech. She just said the truth. "Because you were freezing." In the next hour, the system started moving like it was scared of being seen. A fingerprint tech arrived with a portable kit. June gave prints without complaint. A CPS after-hours worker, different from Latham, quieter, more careful, arrived to do the home visit. She asked June direct questions, checked her ID again, confirmed the address, and photographed basic safety items like smoke alarms and sleeping arrangements. Hannah insisted on one condition in writing: no contact with Karen or Derek, no unsupervised interviews with Mila, and a set time for court review. Latham resisted, then folded under the judge's earlier order. She typed it in, jaw tight. The doctor came back with another update. "Confirmatory lab is still pending, but the preliminary plus the bottle is enough. We're also documenting withdrawal risk. She's staying overnight regardless." Hannah nodded. "Good." Then the detective returned again, voice low, eyes harder than before. "They found a second binder," he said. "Not just placements, complaints, names of caseworkers, notes about who can be handled." June felt cold wash over her arms. Hannah's voice went flat. "That implies internal corruption." The detective nodded once. "Or at least someone looking the other way." Latham, overhearing, snapped, "That's speculative." The detective looked at her. "Then you won't mind handing over your internal call logs for this placement?" Latham's face tightened. "We'll comply with lawful requests." Hannah leaned slightly forward. "We're past requests." In room 4, Eli finally fell asleep, dinosaur tucked under his chin. The nurse dimmed the lights. In room 3, Mila hadn't slept again. She sat upright, alert, like her body didn't believe safety was real. June sat beside her. "When we leave here," June said softly, "you're coming to my house. Quiet, warm, one bedroom, food whenever you're hungry." Mila's eyes darted. "Just you?" "Just me," June said. Mila swallowed. "No Derek." "No Derek," June repeated. Mila's voice shook. "No Karen." "No Karen." Mila's shoulders dropped a fraction, like a strap cutting into her chest had loosened, but then her eyes tightened again. "They'll make me go back later," she whispered. Hannah stepped into the doorway, hearing it. "No," she said, firm. "Not if we keep pressure on the right places." Mila stared at her. "Adults always say later." Hannah didn't blink. "Then we don't let it become later." In the lobby, an officer approached the detective and whispered. The detective's eyes lifted. "They just pulled Derek's phone," the detective said quietly. "There are messages about quiet nights, about extra checks, and about moving the small one if she keeps talking." June's blood ran cold. Mila's voice, small and terrified, barely carried from the bed. "He meant me." The detective nodded once, grim. "Yeah, he did." And at that moment, the hospital's front doors slid open again. A man in a suit stepped inside with a badge clipped to his belt, state investigator energy, no small talk in his posture. Behind him was a woman with a laptop bag and a recorder, eyes scanning the room like she was hunting facts. The suit walked straight to the detective, then to Hannah, and finally his gaze landed on Latham. "I'm Special Investigator Grant," he said, voice calm and sharp. "This case is now under state review. Supervisor, I need you to step aside, effective immediately." Latham's face went pale in a way that made June's stomach twist. Grant looked at the officer. Where's the child? The officer nodded toward pediatrics. Grant turned, took 2 steps, then stopped. Because Karen, still cuffed, lifted her head and smiled. Not a broken smile, not a scared smile. A smile like she knew something they didn't. And she said softly, "You're too late." Karen's "you're too late" sat in the air like a bad smell. Special Investigator Grant didn't react the way Karen wanted. He didn't snap, didn't argue, didn't even look at her for more than a second. He just turned his head slightly toward the detective. "What does she mean?" Grant asked. The detective's face was already tightening. "We're pulling devices. We're securing the placement. We're—" "Not what you're doing," Grant cut in, calm but sharp. "What you might have missed." Karen leaned back in the chair, cuffs clinking softly, and smiled wider. "You'll see." June felt a cold pressure behind her ribs. She went straight to room 3 and closed the door gently, like if she moved too fast, the fear would spill into Mila's bed. Mila was still awake, rigid, eyes fixed on June's face like she could read disaster there. "What?" Mila whispered. June forced her voice steady. "Nothing you need to handle. Adults are talking." Mila's fingers tightened around her paper. Karen said "too late" before. June swallowed. "When?" Mila's voice got small. "When the lady came, the one with the notebook." Karen smiled and said it. Then after, Sophie was gone. June's stomach dropped. She stepped into the hallway and found Hannah immediately. "Mila says Karen's used that line before," June said low. "Right before a caseworker visit, then a kid disappeared from the house." Hannah's eyes hardened. She walked straight to Grant. Grant was already moving toward pediatrics when Hannah intercepted him. "Investigator," Hannah said, controlled. "The child reports that when Karen says 'too late,' a child is usually moved or removed before oversight can see them. I want immediate confirmation of every minor currently linked to that placement. Tonight." Grant didn't blink. "Detective," he said without looking away from Hannah, "pull every placement record, every intake, every discharge for that address, last 24 months, and start a missing minor cross-check." Latham's voice snapped from behind her tablet, reflexive. "We don't have minors missing." Grant turned to her slowly. "Supervisor, you're done speaking unless I ask you a question." Latham went rigid. Karen laughed softly. "He thinks he's in charge." Grant walked to Karen, stopped just outside her reach, and looked down at her like she was a file, not a person. "Where are the other children?" he asked. Karen's smile didn't fade. "What other children?" Grant nodded once. "Okay." He turned away and spoke to the officer. "Get transport ready. We're moving her to central booking. No more sitting in a hospital hallway." Karen's smile flickered, just a flicker. "You can't do that." Grant didn't look back. "Watch me." The officer moved to lift Karen. She tensed like a cornered animal, then snapped into performance again. "This is persecution. They're framing me." Nobody argued with her anymore. They just moved. Hannah followed Grant toward pediatrics. "I want immediate protective orders," she said. "No interviews without counsel, no child moved without court notification." "Agreed," Grant replied. "I'm not letting anyone shuffle paperwork and call it resolution." In room 4, Eli slept under warm blankets with an IV line taped neatly to his arm. A nurse sat nearby charting, eyes soft but alert. Grant looked through the glass first, then nodded. "Good. Keep him here." Then he turned to Mila's door. June was already inside, sitting close, keeping her posture calm, like a human seatbelt holding a frightened child in place. Grant didn't enter immediately. He knocked lightly, waited for the doctor's nod, then stepped in slow. "Mila," he said gently, keeping distance. "My name is Grant. I work for the state. I'm here to make sure you and Eli are safe." Mila stared at him like she didn't know what state meant except as a threat. June leaned close. "He's not with Karen," she whispered. Mila's eyes stayed wary. "They all say that." Grant didn't push. "You don't have to trust me today," he said. "You just have to tell the truth when you can. And if you can't, that's okay too." Mila swallowed. "Karen says truth makes trouble." Grant nodded once. "Sometimes it does. But it also stops people who hurt kids." Mila's fingers moved on her paper, as if she was counting lines for courage. "She moves kids." Hannah stepped into the doorway behind Grant. "Mila," she said softly, When you say she moves kids, do you mean she sends them to another foster home? Or something else? Mila's voice got thin. Cars come at night. June felt her spine go cold. Whose cars? Grant asked. Mila shook her head. Not police, not caseworker. A man comes. Sometimes Karen smiles. Sometimes she's mad and says, "This one's no good." Then the kid is gone. Grant didn't flinch. Do you remember what the man looks like? Mila's eyes squeezed shut, trying to pull a picture from memory. Big, beard. He smells like smoke. He calls Karen K. Grant turned his head slightly. Detective, he said into the hall, voice still calm. Check for known associates. Cross-reference phones. Look for a contact K or repeated late-night visits to that address. The detective nodded, already moving. Mila kept going, trembling. They say it's a ride. They say don't talk. They say if you talk, you go back to the big place. Hannah's voice stayed steady. Did they ever take you in one of those cars? Mila shook her head fast. Karen said I'm worth more because I'm quiet. Derek said I'm good for checks. Grant's eyes narrowed. Checks from where? Mila whispered. State. Latham, hearing from the hallway, snapped. That's not... Grant cut her off without turning. Supervisor, silence. Latham went quiet. June watched Mila's hands shaking around the paper and made herself breathe slowly so Mila could borrow it. Do you remember a name, Mila? June asked softly. Any adult names besides Karen and Derek? Mila hesitated. Ray. Hannah's eyes sharpened. Ray who? Mila shook her head. Just Ray. Karen says Ray's coming and then she cleans. Grant stepped back into the hallway and spoke quietly to the detective. Pull all call/text logs from Derek and Karen. Search for Ray. Check if any vehicle registered to a Ray visited that address. The detective nodded. All ready? Grant turned to Hannah. You said you filed emergency petition? It's submitted, Hannah said, and the judge authorized temporary placement with June pending checks. Grant nodded. We're going to tighten that. I want a no-contact order immediately for Karen and Derek, and I want Latham removed from any decision touching this child. Latham's face flashed with anger. You can't. Grant finally looked directly at her. I just did. In the lobby, Karen was being wheeled toward the doors, still cuffed, still spitting words as if volume could rewrite facts. As she passed pediatrics, she twisted her head and yelled down the hallway, voice sharp, aimed like a dart. Mila, you think you won? You always come back. Mila flinched so hard she jerked the blanket up to her face. June stood instantly and moved to the door, closing it as if it could shut Karen out of the world. Grant's voice stayed calm, but it had steel under it now. Escort her out, he ordered. The doors whooshed. Karen's voice faded into the parking lot. The building breathed again. June sat back down slowly beside Mila. Mila's eyes were glossy, wide. She said, I always come back. June's voice went low and firm. Not this time. Mila stared at her. How? June swallowed. Because too many people saw, too many cameras, too much paper, and because you wrote it down. Mila's fingers loosened around her paper for the first time since the bus stop. She looked at the creased pages like they were proof she existed. Hannah's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then looked up at Grant. Detective just texted. Warrant team found something else. Grant's expression didn't change. What? Hannah read, voice tight. A storage unit key on Karen's ring. They ran the number. Unit is registered under a different name, and there are recent payments. Cash. June's stomach dropped again. Grant nodded once. We're going there now, he said. Hannah's eyes narrowed. Now? Now, Grant repeated. Because too late usually means someone's moving evidence. The detective's radio crackled at the same time, urgent. Detective, a voice said, we opened the placements binder. There are photos. Grant's face went hard and still. Photos of what? A pause, then the voice came back, lower. Kids, not like school photos, Polaroids, dates, notes. June felt sick. Mila, hearing the tension even through the door, whispered, Sophie had a picture. Grant turned toward Mila's room, then back to the detective. Secure everything. Photograph in place, chain of custody, and notify the state trafficking unit. The word trafficking didn't land on Mila's ears as a definition. It landed as a feeling. Her shoulders curled inward like she'd been bracing for a blow she didn't understand. June leaned close to her and spoke softly. "You're safe," she said again, because it was the only sentence that mattered. Mila whispered back, barely audible, "Eli too?" June nodded. "Eli too." Grant looked at Hannah. "Get your judge back on standby," he said. "This is about to explode." Hannah nodded once, and then the hospital intercom chimed quietly, the kind of sound that normally meant nothing. But this time, the nurse's voice came over the speaker, tense and urgent. "Security to pediatrics, now." June's head snapped up. Mila's eyes went wide. Hannah moved toward the door. Grant's posture tightened, because whatever was coming wasn't in the paperwork. It was in the building. "Security to pediatrics, now." The intercom cut off, leaving the hallway with a silence so sharp it felt like a warning. Then, footsteps. Fast, multiple. Not nurses. June was already on her feet. She didn't rush Mila. She didn't yank the blanket away. She just moved her own body into position between the bed and the door, like instinct had become policy. Hannah stepped into the hallway and caught the first security guard as he ran up. "What is it?" she demanded. The guard's eyes were wide. "Someone's trying to get into room 4. "Eli." Grant was moving before the sentence finished. "Who?" "Male," the guard said, "claiming he's family. Won't show ID, keeps saying it's a mistake." June felt her throat tighten. "Derek's in custody." "Not Derek," the guard said. "Different guy." Mila's eyes snapped to June, terrified. "Ray." June didn't answer because she didn't want to say it out loud in front of Mila, but her face did. Grant's voice went cold. "Lock pediatrics down, now. No one enters without verifying identity." In room 3, Mila's breathing turned jagged. Her small hand shot out and grabbed June's sleeve again, hard. "Please don't. Please don't." June leaned close, steady. "You stay right here. Nobody is touching you. I'm not letting go." Hannah pushed into the hallway toward room 4. Grant and the detective followed. The officer who'd been on scene all night snapped his radio up and called for backup inside the hospital. Room 4 was at the end of the short hall. A security guard was planted at the door with a nurse behind him, pale but steady. And there, in front of them, was a man in a dark jacket with a cap pulled low. He wasn't shouting. He was calm, which was worse. Calm meant he'd done this before. "I'm here for the boy," he said, voice flat. "There's been a misunderstanding. I'm authorized." "Authorized by who?" Grant asked. The man's eyes flicked to Grant's badge and tightened. "The agency." Grant stepped closer. "Name?" The man hesitated one fraction too long. "Ray." Grant didn't blink. "Last name?" Ray's jaw flexed. "I don't have to answer you." Grant nodded once. "Yes, you do." Ray tried to look past Grant into room 4. "Eli," he called, not loud, just enough for the boy to hear. "Hey, buddy, it's okay. Let's go." From inside, a tiny sound. Eli stirring, frightened. The nurse blocked the crack of the door with her shoulder, eyes hard. "No." Ray's calm slipped for the first time. "You don't understand. That child isn't supposed to be here." Grant's voice dropped. "That child is exactly where he's supposed to be." Ray's eyes cut to the side, and June saw it from farther back down the hall, the micro-movement of someone checking exits, calculating. The officer stepped up beside Grant. "Ray, you're going to step back from the door." Ray's nostrils flared. "Or what?" "Or you're going to be detained," the officer said. "This is a secured pediatric unit." Ray smiled without warmth. "You can't detain someone for showing up." Grant's voice stayed calm. "We can detain you for attempting to access a minor without identification, without legal authority, during an active criminal investigation." Ray's smile faded. He backed up half a step, then another, like he was deciding whether to fight or vanish. His eyes moved to the elevators. Grant's hand rose slightly. 2 more officers appeared at the hallway entrance, hospital police, called by security. Ray saw them and made a decision. He bolted, not toward the door, toward the side exit corridor. The officers moved instantly. One cut him off at the corner. Ray tried to pivot, but the detective grabbed his jacket and slammed him into the wall with controlled force. The cuffs came out. Metal snapped shut. Ray struggled just long enough to make it worse for himself. "Stop resisting," the officer barked. Ray hissed, "You have no idea what you're doing." Grant leaned in, voice quiet and lethal. "I know exactly what I'm doing." Ray's eyes darted down the hall, toward pediatrics, toward room 3, toward Mila's door like he was trying to burn the location into his mind. June felt something cold twist in her stomach. She turned and went back to Mila. Inside room 3, Mila was trembling so hard the blanket shook. Her eyes were locked on June's face. Was it him? Mila whispered. June didn't lie. Yes. Mila's breath hitched. He came to take Eli. June nodded. He tried. Mila's eyes flooded. He's not supposed to come here. He won't, June said, firm. They stopped him. Mila's voice turned tiny. Will he come again? June held her gaze. Not if we keep doing what we're doing. Not if we keep it in the light. In the hallway, Grant's voice carried just enough to be heard through the door. Search him. Phone, keys, wallet, everything. Bag it. The detective replied, He's got 2 phones. Of course he does, Hannah muttered. A minute later, Grant walked back down the hall, controlled, eyes sharp. He paused at Mila's door, knocked once, and waited. June opened it just enough to keep Mila from feeling exposed. Grant kept his voice gentle. He's in custody, he said. He won't be near you or Eli tonight. Mila stared at him like she wanted to believe and didn't know how. Grant glanced at her paper. You wrote things down, he said softly. That's why we caught him. Mila's lips trembled. Karen said nobody comes. Grant's voice stayed steady. Tonight people came. He turned to Hannah. We need emergency relocation after discharge. Quiet address, confidential, no public record access. Hannah nodded. I'll get a protective order and sealed placement. Latham, now pale and silent, stood off to the side like a person watching the ground disappear under their feet. Grant looked at her once. You're going to provide every call log, every placement record, and every supervisor note connected to that address, he said. And you're going to do it before sunrise, or I'll do it with warrants and subpoenas. Latham swallowed. Yes. In room 4, Eli had woken fully now, crying silently, dinosaur crushed to his chest. June watched through the glass for half a second, then looked back at Mila. Mila's eyes were fixed on that door. Can I see him? Mila whispered. June nodded. Just a second. The doctor allowed the door to open a crack. Mila stepped into the hallway in her socks, wrapped in her blanket like armor. Eli saw her and froze. Mila didn't touch him. She just stood there and said, barely audible, He can't take you. Eli's lip trembled. He said, I'm going. Mila shook her head hard. No, not now. June crouched beside them. Not ever back there, she said, voice steady. Not to Karen, not to Derek, not to Ray. Eli stared at her, then nodded once. Tiny, uncertain, but real. Grant watched the 2 children for a second, then turned away to speak into his phone. Trafficking unit notified. Protective custody confirmed. Suspect detained at hospital attempting access. We have escalation. The system, for once, was moving fast because it had no choice. Later, closer to morning than night, June's background check cleared. The home visit cleared. Conditions were signed. A temporary placement order printed and was hand-delivered to the hospital by a tired clerk who looked like they'd never seen a night like this. Hannah read every line twice. Then she handed it to June. You're the temporary emergency caregiver, she said. Strict conditions. Follow them. Log everything. June nodded. I will. Mila stared at the paper like it was a magic spell she didn't trust. Does it mean I go with you? June kept her voice soft. Yes. When the doctor says it's safe. Mila's breath shook. And I don't go back? June met her eyes. You don't go back. Mila looked down at her own paper, the one she'd written with shaking hands in a house where she wasn't allowed to speak. Then she looked up again, eyes wet. Okay, she whispered, like the word weighed 100 pounds. The doctor discharged Mila later that day with clear documentation. Exposure, trauma response, positive sedative screen under investigation, no return to prior placement. Eli stayed one more night on fluids and evaluation, and Hannah filed the next motion before lunch so he wouldn't disappear into a facility intake pipeline. Karen and Derek were held. Ray was held. The storage unit was opened under warrant and turned into evidence, not rumor. The binders became exhibits. The hospital footage was preserved. The call log started revealing who answered and who didn't, and the most important part wasn't any of that. It was the moment June walked Mila out of the hospital into daylight, Real daylight, and Mila stopped at the curb, clutching her plastic bag and her paper like she expected someone to yank her back. June didn't rush her. She just opened the car door and waited. Mila hesitated, then climbed in slowly, like she was stepping into a new life and didn't know if it would vanish. June buckled her in gently, hands steady. Mila stared out the window. "If I'm good, will you keep me?" June didn't answer with a promise she couldn't control. She answered with a choice. "I'm keeping you because you're you," June said, "not because you're quiet." Mila's breath caught. She blinked hard, once, twice, then looked straight ahead. As they pulled away, Mila whispered, almost too quiet to hear, "Thank you." And June drove without looking back, because for the first time, Mila didn't need to.